a plan, oh grand and true, to bring back a custom just for you. A dowry's charm to rekindle the fire. In a world where romance might expire.
All right. Hope I'm coming in loud and clear, guys. If you're just tuning in after the show, I'd highly recommend skipping forward about 5 minutes. I might even get this one time-stamped eventually. I think this is going to be a good episode. So for the folks out there that watch this after, then just keep that in mind. Yo, Trevor. Hey, man. Shout out to you, bro. Music's a little too loud, huh? Good to know, good to know. There we go. That should hopefully be better. Thanks for telling me, man. I always like trip off audio stuff, and it's just always a shame when folks don't tell me, so appreciate that. Man, AI is so crazy. Like, in the middle of the week, I have this song stuck in my head, and it was probably made in like a minute and a half. Thank you, Mr. Pitt. How's the trip? I'll talk about that a bit. It went very well. Maybe we'll let some more folks come in here, and then we can kind of go over that all at once, because some of the other guys might ask too. Got that one. Hey, Talut, welcome in, man. What's good, my bro? Shah tuning in early tonight. Dude, I appreciate that. I really do, because typically this is on Saturday. But I was out of town yesterday and the day before, and I really wanted to get a stream in this week, so I'm happy I did that, or I can do that. I know I was hoping Klaus could come in, just because what we're gonna be doing today is it's gonna be pretty fun. We're gonna be going over a paper, so this is gonna be kind of different. It's gonna be kind of different, but I think it's gonna be worth it, because we're all gonna learn something. Now, yes, it is going to be a lot of text on the screen. I do have a couple clips to try to break this up, but they're two very short clips. So, just so you guys know. But this paper is called Romantic Love or Material Interest, Choosing Partners in 19th Century Germany. And this is from it's published in the Journal of Family History, written by Peter Borscheid. So we're going to be going over that. But before we do that, I'm also going to go over a couple of fun stories. So we're going to have Cesar Quintana to thank for that. The legend in the space. Let me just pull those up, actually. Man, this song just goes too hard. It goes too hard. Okay. Okay. Let's make it clear. Okay. That's the longer one. Uh-oh. All right, sweet. Yeah, so that's good to go. So we'll bring that up when we're ready, and then beyond that, we will have these. I have a second paper. They're pretty short papers, just so you guys know. I'm not trying to trap you guys into well, it's probably going to be like 2 or 3 hours long. I'm not trying to trap you into like a boring lecture or anything like that. But this paper is the gift that keeps on giving. And I got to thank Peter Wright for this. He actually sent me this. So I actually just read it recently, but he had sent it to me a while ago, and I hadn't had the time to read it. When I read it, I'm like, I think I really need to share this on stream. Okay, so this is called Romantic Love or Material Interest, Choosing Partners in 19th Century Germany. And it's a fantastic paper, and it's got a lot of good information. So it's very dowry specific. We're going to learn a lot tonight. Mailspace says, Hello, Sunday night. Dang, gonna have to sleep soon. I must work still tomorrow. Hey, man, I hear you. I totally understand it, bro. I appreciate you coming in and saying hi. Um, I would have preferred to do this on Saturday like usual. But I wanted to, I came home a day early from LA. Oh, and just so you guys know, I mean, if you're in the Discord, you already know, but I actually went down to LA and I met up with Pearl and we did a podcast together, which we recorded it, should be posted to her channel soon enough whenever they get around to it. So I'm not exactly sure about an exact day, but we talked about child support. We talked about the history of the dowry. And I also did a special like clip or whatever it is, actually a separate video for her Audacity Network stuff. So there's some exclusive content there. But I think you guys are really going to enjoy the podcast when it comes out. I'm pretty excited about that. So that's why we didn't have a stream yesterday. It's just so you guys know. Okay, where are we at? Yo, Mr. Pitt, man, shout out to you. Appreciate you. Sunday night with Shah. Heck yeah, man. I'm glad you can be here. We're probably not going to have Klaus tonight. I'm sure he'll watch this. Klaus, if you're listening the next day, you're a legend. Sorry I couldn't do this Saturday, man. I know you got work too. But we're talking about specifically 19th century Germany. So, unfortunately, we can't have Klaus with us tonight to drop in that special knowledge. Mr. Pitt says, you're more than welcome for the song, brother. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I had someone else request let's see. Oh, man. What did he say? That was for Murder for Crows. Oh, he's actually in here right now. Oh, that's perfect. Murder for Crows says, I request a dowry song along the lines of a murder folk ballad, Appalachian or otherwise. That actually sounds really good. I don't know what a murder folk ballad is, but I feel like I need to watch a 2-hour movie from the late 90s, which centers around that on my CRT TV now, and I'll be pretty happy if I can do that. So I don't know what that is, but it sounds like it's something that should exist as a musical. Talut Bora says, yeah, Mr. Peter sent us here through his FB page. Awesome, man. Shout out to Peter Wright. He's the one who sent me this paper, and I appreciate him for circulating the stream there. Yo, Karin, hey, welcome in, man. Glad to see you here, bro. Hope everything's going well. Yo, how is everyone doing tonight? We are all chilling, big chilling. Murder of Crows, like the video. I appreciate you, man. Yeah, please hit the like button if you're in here. We're already over 10 viewers. I mean, hey, I'd say we got more than a party going on at this point. Anybody else who isn't here, I mean, they can just watch it after the fact. One thing I'd like to do is kind of get timestamps going. I do a bad job of rewatching my own stuff, and if I did that, I would go through and do timestamps, but I feel like this one might need it. Like if I did a couple, it might help. Trevor says, will you be doing the Saturday, Wednesday schedule? I was thinking about pushing this to Wednesday. I don't know if I'll be doing this Wednesday just because I'm going to be working a little bit more this week. I do want to do the Wednesday, Saturday schedule. I'm also going to be out of town the following week, so I can't do it next Wednesday, but maybe the Wednesday after that, I can do that. So I got a couple more things I got to go do. But I do want to move to a Saturday, Wednesday schedule. So maybe like 2-3 hour streams. We'll play it by ear. If it's not working out, it's not working out. If the folks like it, so be it. Discord invitation. Oh, looks like Mr. Pitt's got you there. Thank you for that, Mr. Pitt. Murder of Crow says, no amount of dowry can counter the perpetual threat of the Mordor squad on speed dial. Yeah, I hear that, man. Shah, you got all the love, man. Thank you, bro. Appreciate that. All right. Well, yeah, I'd say, so before we get into the paper, so when I was in LA, just to give another shout out to our very own Caesar Quintana. We see him in the chat all the time. He supports the channel. You've also seen him on Paul Elam's channel. He's done an interview with him. He's done an interview with Pearl once a while ago. He's done an interview with a few of the folks around here. And after I had my interview with Pearl, the following day, I actually met up with Caesar and, we had lunch and we were talking about stuff. And Caesar Quintana was dropping some straight knowledge. He was dropping some absolute knowledge. And he told me the origin of the Christmas stocking. So, the Christmas stockings that we all know and love. Let me just get a picture of them right here for you. So if you folks celebrate Christmas stockings at home, you guys have this. They usually hang it over here by the fireplace, this kind of thing. Okay, cool, cool. Nothing crazy. Well, he was telling me that the origin of the Christmas stocking is actually 100% wound up with the dowry and dowry history. And there's actually a very famous story about Saint Nick, who inspires a lot of this, Christmas stuff. And there's actually a children's version, and then there is an adult version. And what I was going to do was I was going to read the children's version just because it's shorter, and then I'll pull up an adult version so that we can just look at it a little bit more. And then so every time you see a Christmas stocking from here on out, I want you to remember this, okay? But this is why this is a vestige of these, more traditional times. And this is why everybody puts the stockings by their fireplace when they celebrate Christmas. So this is called the Three Impoverished Maidens. Uh-oh. So we got 3 women with no money over here. Ain't that gonna be tough? And it says, or the story of the dowries. So I'll go ahead and read this to you. There was a man once rich who had fallen on hard times. Now poor, he had 3 daughters of an age to be married. In those days, a young woman's family had to have something of value, a dowry. Okay.
What's the dowry situation? Exactly. Let's get down to brass tacks here.
Yeah, this guy fell on hard times. He wasn't one of these.
Which one of these broads has the richest father?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, without a dowry, a woman was unlikely to marry. Yeah, it's our check against hypergamy. We've talked about this. We know this on the channel here. But now we know how this is related to Christmas. This poor man's daughters without dowries were therefore destined to be sold into slavery or worse. Now, when they say slavery, this is something that they did to make the children's version more palatable than the adult version. Because in the adult version, basically, they don't have anything else, and they're probably going to end up in the brothels, so to speak. They don't call it the world's oldest profession for nothing. So that's what they're saying by slavery. They use that word to cover it up. I'll show you an adult version after this, okay? So, I mean, this kind of goes into the wife versus concubine discussion we've been having. And without a dowry, someone is not made a wife. At best, they're a concubine. Also, shout out to the 33 Secrets. He made a video called Alpha Concubines. You guys should go check it out. Word of the family's misfortune reached Nicholas, who had the wealth inherited from his parents. Coming in secret by night, he tossed a bag of gold into the house. It sailed in through an open window, landing in a stocking, left before the fire to dry. Now, it could also be down the chimney. What joy in the morning when the gold was discovered, the first daughter was soon wed, because now she can bring something to the table. Not long after, another bag of gold again appeared mysteriously. The second daughter was married. The father, now very anxious to know who the secret benefactor was, kept watch during the night. A third bag of gold landed inside the house, and the watchful father leapt up and caught the fleeing donor. "Ah, Nicholas, it is you!" cried the father. "You have saved my daughters from certain disaster." Or, becoming the tavern wench, so to speak. Nicholas, embarrassed and not wishing to be known, begged the man to keep his identity secret. I guess that didn't turn out so well. "You must thank God alone for providing these gifts in answer to your prayers for deliverance." So big shout out, first of all, here to our good friend of the channel, Caesar Quintana, for blessing us with that knowledge. So the next time Tradcons tell you that, dowry or none of this, that's not something we did, I want you to just go to their house on Christmas and say, hey, why do you have stockings up? And when they don't know the origin of this thing that they're doing, I want you to show them this story. Okay, real quick, before we get to the adult version, let me just catch up on the comments, and then we'll go ahead and get there. Are we doing the live stream on a Wednesday? It's probably not going to happen this Wednesday, unfortunately. I think I'm still a couple weeks away from a Wednesday stream. Timmy Kramer 2000. Most American women have been divorced twice and hunting for the next resource provider. Yo, Timmy, welcome in, bro. That is a story that we are more than familiar with at this point. Mr. Pitt says, I posted to folk ballad dowry song in the Discord. Got it. Okay, I'll keep that in mind, what you said there. So I'll have to check them out later before I play them on stream. All right, but going from there, let's go ahead and get to the adult version. All right. This is not the sugarcoating. A dowry for the widower's daughters. The story of St. Nicholas and the widower's daughters is today the best-known story from the life of St. Nicholas. This story is the reason we hang stockings for St. Nicholas to fill, or set out shoes if you follow the Dutch tradition. In the St. Nicholas Day snow, Uncle Andrew tells the children one version of this story. Here's the way I like to tell it. Before Nicholas was a saint, when St. Nicholas was still a young man, before he was a bishop, and long before he was a saint, he was an orphan. His parents died in one of the epidemics that swept through the countryside. Nicholas survived the epidemic. Perhaps when his parents became ill, they sent their only son to stay with his beloved uncle, Bishop Nicholas of Patara, at the monastery outside the city, and he stayed there after the death of his parents. His parents had been wealthy, but he had no interest in their money. He wanted to live in piety and obscurity. He spent much of his time standing quietly in the back of the church praying. When he was in the town, he moved quietly, listened much, and said little, and he heard a great deal. St. Nicholas, of course, was not a gossip, but wherever people gather, stories are told. And he heard the stories. A man who lived near his parents' home had fallen on hard time. His wife had died during the epidemic that had killed Nicholas's parents, and he had been stricken and nearly died. He was left with 3 young daughters to raise on his own. Then there had been an accident. He'd made his fortune in trade, but when he could no longer work, there was no more income. His wealth dwindled as he spent money on doctors and on food, on the necessities of life. By the way, this guy is a tradesman, and we're going to see in the paper that we look at later, which discusses 19th century Germany. It's discussing dowry and how this works. And it's, there's this huge misconception of like, oh, only royalty did that. That's absolutely not true. Anybody who's doing this activity of monogamy over here from the top down is using the dowry system. So this is yet another story that, gives us a little bit of corroboration for that. People offered to help, but he was a proud man. He refused every offer, and over time, the offers dwindled. Eventually, he knew that he had to do something. He had sold what he could. He'd rented out part of his home, but even with that, he and his daughters were going to starve. He tried to find husbands for them, of course. With a good marriage, they'd be taken care of, but the friends that had offered to help wouldn't accept a dowerless daughter. Yep.
Which one of these broads has the richest father?
And if it ain't you, then, marriage ain't on the books for you over here. So, but the friends that had offered to help wouldn't accept a dowerless daughter for their sons, and there was no money for a dowry. All they had left was the clothes on their bodies, and of course, their bodies. Uh-oh, this is where the adult stuff comes in. And his daughters' bodies were beautiful. Okay, so they're beautiful, huh? All right. Well, let's see what happens. He knew it was an evil thought, but starvation was evil too. He began asking the brothels around Patara how much his daughters could earn that way. Uh-oh. And, we see a lot of dowerless women engage in this today also, whether it be that or OnlyFans or so be it. This reminds me of something. In my discussion with Pearl, she asked me, kind of what happens with women without dowries. And I talked about, joining a convent. I talked about not being married. And I talked about working and saving a dowry, basically, whether it's a maidservant in another house. But I forgot to mention, this trade, pay for play, basically. Maybe it was good that I didn't, but yeah, this is kind of one of the other lanes here when you don't got no money. Okay. But starvation was evil too. He began asking the brothels around Patara how much his daughters could earn that way. Working as prostitutes would put them out of the communion of the church, of course, but at least they wouldn't starve. How to help a proud man. St. Nicholas couldn't help hearing about the widower's plans for his daughters. Everyone in Patara was talking about it, saying what a shame it was that the old man wouldn't accept help. Speculating about how much the girls would earn, wondering if it would be enough to restore the family's fortunes. If only the man had said... I want to say another thing. You know how you always hear You can't turn a hoe into a housewife. I will submit to the space this statement. The only thing that can actually turn a hoe into a housewife is a dowry. Just putting that out there. And we're kind of getting a little bit of that from the story because this guy, where we get Christmas stockings from, oh, ooh, happy Christmas stockings. We're going to put stuff in there. It's great. Originally, you know, dowries were put in there in this story. He's actually thinking about taking his daughters to the local brothel so that they can earn that way and then try to get them married to get whatever, you know, that would happen to be. But that is some rough times. That is some rough times. Okay. Wondering if it would be enough to restore the family's fortunes. If only the man had set enough aside for dowries for the girls, but it's hard to think that far in the future when you need food and medicine today. Of course, Nicholas thought he had more than enough money to provide dowries for the widower's daughters, but the old man wouldn't accept it. He knew that for sure because he'd already tried to give him the money. The old man's wrath had been terrible. By the way, Peter, I see you in here. Shout out to you, man. But his plans were terrible too. St. Nicholas walked along the waterfront pondering. The sun was setting. He watched a wharf rat scurry across a ledge and into a house through a window. Even when windows were closed and barred, rats and mice could slip in, and that's not all that could slip in. Nicholas ran back to the monastery and told his uncle his plan. Under the cover of darkness, it didn't take much to make it happen. Nicholas exchanged his everyday clothes for those of a high-ranking servant. He would attract too much attention walking the streets at night, but nobody would notice a servant. He filled a small leather pouch with gold coins. Okay, we got movable wealth here, not land. We got movable wealth, and fastened it to his belt. It clinked a bit as he walked, but not too badly. It was his good fortune that the moon was new that night. There would be only starlight to show him his way, and only starlight to betray his face to people walking by. He could do this. Keeping his head down, Nicholas walked from the monastery to the neighborhood, where he'd lived as a small child. He stopped in the shadows and stared at the house. The front windows wouldn't do. Someone would see him even at that hour and mistake him for a robber. But he couldn't drop the gold into his storeroom. It might never be found. He walked to the side of the house, took the pouch of gold from his belt, and dropped it through the window. It landed with a soft thunk. He held his breath. He heard people inside the house stir. Slowly, they became still. Silence returned. He slipped away into the darkness. It was only a week later that invitations went out for the wedding of the widower's eldest daughter. The gossips had no idea where he'd come into the money, but he had gold. Gold for a dowry. Gold for a wedding, and the widower's eldest daughter became a merchant's wife. All right, shout out a merchant's wife. She did pretty good. Good for her. Good for her. She would be well provided for. See that? That is the necessary prerequisite to getting provided for a woman. All right, dowry equals staying at home. She would never again go to sleep hungry. St. Nicholas waited until after the wedding, and then he waited another week for the new moon. He donned the servant's clothing again and went back to the widower's home. A few days later, another wedding was announced. The rumors of brothels had ceased. The widower was once again attending divine services at church. His younger daughter went with him. They had quit going long ago, ashamed to be at church in clothing that was patched and worn, but the gold had allowed them new garments for the wedding, simpler garments that they had worn in the past, but garments that they could wear to church without shame. But gold enough for the garments wasn't gold enough to support the widower and his remaining daughter for long. As St. Nicholas planned his next midnight delivery, the widower stood in the church and prayed. He had received help he had no way to refuse. Now he wanted to know who had delivered his daughters from the evil that he had planned for them. He asked God to show him his benefactor so that he could repay the kindness. Not with money, of course. He'd never be able to do that. But he wanted to pray for his benefactor by name. The final gift. On a moonless night, a few weeks later, the widower was restless. The night was cold. Maybe he even left out cookies and milk for him. His joints ached. He couldn't sleep. And as he lay there in the darkness, he heard the sound of footsteps outside. He got up as quietly as he could and went out his front door. As a shadow slipped out into the street, he shouted, "Ho, you there, wait!" And the shadow stopped moving. The widower approached. It was the young man, Nicholas. "Why?" he asked. "I had no need of gold," Nicholas said. But he's definitely got a heart of gold. "It's a burden to me. In your hands, it could be put to good use." They stared at each other. "Shall I give you a seat of honor at the next wedding?" Nicholas shook his head. "No, please, Father, tell no one." Let it stay between us as long as we breathe. The old man nodded. He held out his arms and embraced Nicholas. His tears fell into the saint's hair. I will not speak of it, the man said, except in prayer. All right. Yeah, so we got... where's my applause button? We learned something today. That's thanks to Cesar Quintana. He told me that over lunch there in Southern California. So big shout out to him. Big shout out to him. I do need to catch up with the chat. And then I'm going to show you one more thing. You know what? Before the chat, let me just show you something. And this kind of grinds my gears a little bit. When you look up the Christmas stocking on Wikipedia, it corroborates what we're saying. It says the origins of the Christmas stocking was first mentioned in a... Christmas stockings were mentioned as an established American tradition as early as 1823 in a poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas. This is literally what we just read, okay? Now, what sucks about this is when you read this, it doesn't mention the brothel. Well, I think it mentions the brothel, but it doesn't mention dowries. It's almost like somebody went in here and they purposely tried to get rid of the word dowry, lest we remember something. Look at this. It says, the origin of the Christmas stocking is thought to originate in the life of St. Nicholas. While there are no written records of the origin of the Christmas stocking, there are popular legends in an attempt to tell the history of the Christmas tradition. One such legend has several variations, but the following is a good example. St. Nicholas was staying with the poor family and heard that the father was planning to sell his 3 daughters into prostitution to save them all from starvation. St. Nicholas wanted to help, but knew that the old man would not accept charity, so he decided to help in secret. So yeah, he puts the bags in there, he goes to the windows, puts the bags in there, the dad finds it, he's overjoyed, and it says the girls are saved from their sad fate. Other versions of the story say that St. Nicholas threw the 3 bags of gold directly into the stocking and hung them by the fireplace to dry. But it doesn't mention the dowry in here. You know what I mean? It's like someone got in there and was just like, let's take out the part where the way they got saved was by getting dowries and married to men that would then provide for them. So basically they got some money and then they got to be strong and independent and, you know, make decisions and do whatever the hell they wanted to do. But they weren't, you know, their only other option wasn't prostitution. I just find that a little weird. You know, Wikipedia has done its job for over a decade, you know, and I appreciate Wikipedia, but we're going to need an edit on this one. We're going to need an edit on this one. I'm just putting that in there. So just to let y'all know, I'm a little bit weirded out by that. Let me just catch up with chat real quick. Oh, I see a donation. Yo, Cesar Quintana, our very own Cesar. I was just talking about you a little bit earlier. What's up, Shah? You covered the story. That's cool, man. Yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks to you. I am going to freaking bring that story out every chance I get, just to let you know. You know, if TradCons aren't having this dowry stuff and I got to sit here and ask them if they're hanging up stockings during Christmas time in their house and they say yes, then I got to recount this whole story to them and I will gladly do it. And it's all thanks to you, Caesar. I appreciate that. Let me just go back to where I was. Peter Wright, shout out to Peter, says we need a Christmas dowry song in the Mariah Carey voice. That would be a fantastic one. Oh, man. Yeah, I wish I would have thought of that. Could have had it for the stream. Karen says it would be interesting to know why in India dowry is equated to slavery. That's an interesting thing. I'd have to look into that. And is that a more recent thing? Because for a long time in India, I think that's what renders a marriage respectable. But maybe you can give us some more information on that. Murder of Crows says, always stepping over them, starter husbands. Hope that song will trash P. Motola also. Has to be done right. Okay, we got the folks in here. Because, like, they're not all 304s. But if the daughters do sex work, then wouldn't that mean they would be kicked out of the church? I think that's a good point. So maybe he still couldn't get them married after that. So maybe they can't be a housewife in that sense. Good point. Mr. Pitt says, imagine going to the JUCO to grow your dowry. Shaking my head. I personally would take a dowryless virgin over a girl that dealt with 500 dudes to provide a dowry. I hear you on that. I don't know why. Like, I think about it, and I think the reason I think that is because I think of like porn stars getting married. You know, you see that, and it's like sometimes it seems like they have this career, and then suddenly they're like married, and it's like, how did they pull that off? And you gotta wonder, like, did a lot of that have to do with the money they made in the profession, so to speak? Like that one girl with the red hair that married the TikTok guy recently. It kind of makes you wonder, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so apparently she's a housewife now. Mr. Pitt says, not into folk ballads, but I know how to use Suno AI pretty well. Got it, got it. And once again, thank you, Caesar. I appreciate that. The CIA controls Wikipedia. No wonder this crucial information for men is omitted intentionally. Yeah, I mean, like, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say it was an accident. But part of me just wonders. It sounds like somebody who edited that page had an agenda. So a dowryless virgin worth more than a prostitute with the juicy dowry? That's a good question. I feel like It's Complicated channel needs to ask that to some folks over there and say, would you take a woman with the huge, would you take an ex-OnlyFans person with a huge dowry, or would you take a dowryless woman in our current family law environment? If you believe that, you know, if the person's actually a virgin. That would be a funny question. Man, I gotta make that a poll. I'm gonna do that right now. Sorry, guys. That's a fantastic question. Ex-OF chick with huge dowry, or I guess the word is dowerless. Dowerless virgin. Okay. Now, what's not in this question is the relative hotness scale of either chick, but, you know, I'm just gonna say, how about you just imagine them at the same level? So, you know, maybe that'll make it, you know, even, I guess. Okay, and what's the other one? Dowerless virgin. All right, there's the poll, legends. All right, we're ready. Juco Chucos will drain one's wallet along with the main vein. Yeah, I mean, especially in these times. Shah's got the finest shades. Thank you, man. They're my blue light blocking glasses. Are the comments supposed to show up on stream? I do that myself. I have a program here and it lets me put it on. I just do it to give y'all some shine. If you don't want me to put it on, you can always let me know and I won't pull it up. The history of dowry is a little complex because so many religions follow traditions in their own way. It would be interesting to dive into it. Yeah, I mean, I know India's goes back a long way. You know, I know it goes back to like the code of Manu or the laws of Manu. There is a kind of bride wealth that was called a surah, and I think that was more something of the lower classes, but then I think Stradan is what they call it, kind of took over from the code of Manu, and that led to this sort of dowry monogamy thing that was so characteristic of India. Like divorce is something that's not supposed to happen over there. And then so that's what it's been for a long time until, you know, relatively recently with feminism and modernization and these kinds of things. Yo, JP, thanks for the $2, man. Appreciate you, bro. Hard-earned money right there. Shout out Shah in the building. Glad you're here, sir. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. Glad you're here as well. Adriana Chechik complains about guys she dates wanting to get down to business early. Karen says, yeah, that's a good question. How do these ex-porn stars or OF chicks get married after doing what they do? Yeah, and it always seems like it's a relatively, like, I don't know. There's probably people getting divorced. You just never hear about it. But they always make it seem like marriage is going fantastic. Everything's good. But who knows? I would wonder, though, huh? Who bought the house in this relationship? What was the deal? I'm curious. Did this happen back in the 18th or 19th or even early 20th century? I think it did. I don't want to say yes definitively until I find you a source, but I think it is possible. But I don't want to say yes definitively. So if I find a source on that, I do know that women without dowries, they would be more along the lines of a concubine. And even in like ancient Rome, giving a dowry, you know, with the bride is what gave her the respectability of a wife. So it's an interesting discussion. I would love to find more sources on that. Trevor says, I'm asking because the comments aren't showing up. Oh, they're not. Oh, dang, dude. Thanks for letting me know. I didn't even realize that. Man, there's always something I got to reset here. I'll fix that for you right now. Trevor, man, you're saving me twice this stream. YouTube chat. Just a second, legends. My bad, guys. My bad. There we go. All right, we're in the building. Perfect. Thank you so much for that, man. All right, guys. Let's get down to business here. We got a little bit of a. It's gonna be kind of like a classroom over here today. This isn't gonna be us reacting to a video. This is 12 pages. Now the good news is like 2 of these pages have graphs on it. So really, it's like, and then one of the pages is like mostly references. Okay, I mean, you know, it's like 60% references. Okay, so it's not gonna be that much. But we're going to stop as we go through it. And I really think this paper is like important enough to share and make a, just make a stream out of. Real quick, let me just end the poll, see where y'all at on this. Okay, well, it would appear, okay, 69% of y'all would go for the dowerless virgin. All right, shout out to y'all. And 30%, okay, a surprising 30% would go for the XOF lady. Listen, all I'll say is I'm open to negotiation. I will hear anybody's deal or offer they want to put on the table, and I will weigh those options and think about, like, is this something I might be able, I don't know, maybe, let me think about this. Let me think about where I'm at. And, another thing, too, you got to consider is that they're coming with the dowry, but it's like, who are they shooting at on the scale of trying to settle down with? It could be somebody that's like not up here. It doesn't mean that they're getting a dowry and they're getting a high status, high income guy from, some high status family. It could mean they're coming up with a higher than normal dowry and they're coming to some guy that's lower on the income stratification, hierarchy here or scale, right? So they could be coming to, I don't know, some, regular tradesman or whatever, a farmer or something and say, well, do you want to take the deal? 30% of y'all might take the deal. I might even, man, I wish I could have voted in my own poll. I would have loved to move that, but it, maybe it would have messed up the accuracy of that. So I apologize for that. Murder of Crows real quick says the Riley super corn star got hooked and babied some sort of Olympian. Okay. I'm not sure. I think I think I know what you're talking about. Shah, I would take a virgin dowerless girl only if she's 10 years younger than me and gonna come up with the 50% of the bills. Hey, it's all part of the negotiation, man. I'm glad that you're thinking about this. See, like now you're thinking, okay, I might, what would work for me here? How would I do this in context of all this stuff? That's what I want to see. Murder of Crow says, even the virgin is a dice toss. If the Mordor squad is always on speed dial, never forget. Well, I mean, Steven Crowder took the virgin deal. You saw how that turned out. He took the dowerless virgin. I'm not happy. Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, I'll catch up with chat in a bit. And man, I've been talking a lot. I actually lost my voice yesterday. So maybe it wasn't the best decision in the world to decide to read a 12-page paper to you guys for a stream tonight, but if my voice gives out, I'm sorry. Oh, by the way, the electricity went out in my house for like 5 seconds earlier today. Twice it happened. It was really windy. So if my stream suddenly cuts off, well, then you guys don't have to wonder why that happened. So I just got to put a fair warning out there for y'all on that. All right, well, let's get into the fun here tonight. This is from the Journal of Family History. I believe this was written in the 70s. 1986, Journal of Family History. Okay, that's not, it's funny to me. It's like, oh, that's not too long ago. But then when you really think about it, it's like, man, that's, that's, 30 years ago thereabouts, if I'm doing my math right. Romantic love or material interest, choosing partners in 19th century Germany. This is from Peter Borscheid. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Shout out to Peter Borscheid. I tried to look at more information on him. I couldn't find that much. Abstract, influenced by the Enlightenment and the Romantic era, the love match became established as an ideology and norm at the beginning of the 19th century. Although love, quote unquote, and the love match initially figured more prominently in the lives of a small elite minority, early 19th century literature gives the impression that these had already become democratized. In reality, however, this publicly touted norm was not strongly followed. Let me try to make this bigger. Guys, I'm not mad at you if you don't want to look at the stream. I mean, if it's easier for me to have this, that could work too. But yeah, this is what we're dealing with right now. In reality, however, this publicly touted norm was not strongly followed. So what they're saying is that by this time in history, people are starting to, it's starting to become a vogue to be a romantic, so to speak. Like, this is new. And what this guy in this paper is trying to figure out is how many people were actually getting married based off of this ideal of, you know, romanticism. Or were they more pragmatic in their approach? Were they more concerned about things like dowry and wealth of their partner? So we're going to find out. Okay. A comparison of each partner's financial contribution to the marriage, further substantiated by autobiographical and case file material, reveals the marriage still rested, as in previous centuries, on a search for partners of equal financial standing. Okay, so this is frankly the answer to the 12 pages right here. I mean, just for the guys who you don't want to wait till the end. But the answer is no. Most people are still looking to marry someone that brings a equal financial contribution. It literally says the word equal right here. This is the equality, guys. On a search for partners of equal financial standing. This is what most of the people were doing, as in previous centuries, okay? The factor of love did not disrupt the order of selection criteria. Money remained central. Social status and prestige determined choice of partner. Cinderella quote-unquote marriages happened only in fairy tales. The majority of the population endorsed the idea of love, but at the decisive moment of partner choice, discarded it as a dream. So, you know, in society, they're like, oh, yeah, that's beautiful. They love each other. But then when it actually came to negotiating their own marriages, they were very pragmatic about it. Okay, so fan-freaking-tastic. That's where we're at. And, you know, just to point out, guys, too, it's like we've been watching essentially love match marriages took over once the economy just became good enough for a guy to be able to pay for a whole family and enough people to do that. You know, modernization, all these kinds of things brought on a certain era of wealth, which we are now exiting, in my humble opinion. This is why millennials are having trouble buying homes, and you're hearing all this stuff, and people are in the debt, and they're living with the parents and all this kind of stuff. So we're exiting this kind of fantastic economic era that we had, okay? And, you know, there's plenty of other creators that talk about the disaster of love marriages. Coach Greg Adams, I think his channel kind of represents all the things that go wrong in a marriage when it's, you know, based off of a love match or a romantic match, or the way people, you know, search for a spouse these days. Okay. Modern industrial society differs from earlier societies, both in the more intense nature of its personal relationships and in the greater number of superficial relationships. While the latter have multiplied as a result of recent economic developments, the changes leading toward more intense personal relationships are generally qualitative. In short, over the course of more than a century, the possibilities for establishing intimate relationships and communicating with others on a personal and intimate basis have improved. By the way, this guy's writing this in the 80s. I don't think he could have ever imagined the internet and dating apps and all these kinds of things. The institution of marriage, in particular, has taken on a higher quality as a result of this refinement in interpersonal relationships. Real quick, just to give the writer some shine, Peter Borscheid is a professor of social and economic history at the University of Münster, West Germany. He has studied the standard of living and the family as a whole in southwestern Germany between 1648 and 1914, and is also involved in research on the history of life insurance and Social Security in West Germany. Oh, those sound interesting. In Germany, the turning point is generally considered to be the age of romanticism. Dun, 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 dun. Now, shout out to Peter Wright. I think he might still be in the chat, but, you know, he gave us this amazing work on, chivalry. And he talks about how, you know, chivalry is kind of co-opted by, to become romantic chivalry, and how gynocentrism takes over. Shout out to gynocentrism.com. And, for a long time it was, and as this paper kind of corroborates, only a certain elite few can really afford this. But as times changed, people that became in vogue, and as people can kind of afford it more, a welfare state probably helps with this somewhat. People started to do this, screw you, mom and dad. We love each other. We're going to go rent an apartment for $300 a month. We don't need you anymore. Mom and dad's like, okay, screw you. We've been paying into Social Security, so our retirement's taken care of. We don't need you to take care of us in our old age. Screw you. You're 18. Move out of here. And that's kind of where we've been at. Okay. In Germany, the turning point is generally considered to be the age of Romanticism, when emotional, physical love prevailed as the foundation for marriage, and the concept of the love match, stressing the unity of love in marriage, became the new ideal to follow. As evidence for these changes in behavior, the emphasis in the literature of the age on love and marriage is often cited along with the fundamental changes in the conception of family in marriage that took place at the beginning of the 19th century. At this time, the conventional view of marital love as the manifestation of solidarity, comradeship, and duty was superseded by the idea of love as a sexually founded relationship. So this is a marriage of passion. I want to show you guys a clip. And it's from a movie called Anna Karenina. It's actually from a TV serial that's a little bit more, I think serial is the right word for it. That is a little bit more recent. Let me see. It was Karenina written. So this is written in 1875, but I'm going to show you guys a TV version of it. I have another clip, and that's going to be from a Count of Monte Cristo movie. But that book was also written around the same time. The Count of Monte Cristo was written in 1844 to 46, looks like. So this is around the same time period of the paper that we're talking about, just to give you guys an understanding of that. So let me just go ahead and pull this back up. So I'm going to show you guys a clip here. Okay. Okay, now, so this is a Russian show. We're going to have to look at subtitles, guys. Okay, now, okay. She's saying, besides, I really like Anna Karenina. And so this is a mom talking to her son. Her son, Vronsky, Count Vronsky, is a young, up-and-coming guy. He's in the military. He can attract a very good marriage in high Russian society. Okay, but he's having a love affair with a married woman named Anna Karenina. That's what the novel's named after. And his mom kind of has some suspicions of this. So she's like, well, I really liked Anna Karenina. She has so much love for her son. I know I'm kind of in the way, so you guys probably can't see this as clearly. And then she's like, I love you the same way she loves her son. Oh yeah, by the way, she's a mom and she's married, and these two are having an affair. Oh, come on now. Hear that? Here's the red pill. Yet she's the same as any other. Okay, this is what the mom is telling the son because she's trying to prevent the son from making a stupid decision and marrying, for the right reasons. She is the same as any other beautiful, respectable woman. All right, she's trying to say the abundance mentality. She's like, look at you, son. I took all this time. Father and I raised you. We know what your potential is. You got to have an abundance mentality out here. So mom's trying to lay on some red pills. Bear that in mind. Okay, now here's the woman that's basically cheating on her husband and kind of destroying her family for him. She's talking with the other ladies, of their social circle. And the subtitle says, I heard that they married for passion. Okay, so this is going to be our age of romanticism. This is going to be our love match. All right, I heard that they married for passion. Okay, so these are the things people are talking about. They're writing books about it this time. For passion? Who considers passion nowadays? Let me just get myself out of the way. Okay. Well, there it is. The only happy marriages I know are ones of reason. See that? So this is like normal back then, right? We're talking about dowries, finances. That's a marriage of reason compared to a marriage of passion.
только по рассудку.
In such marriages, people have moved past their follies.
Браками по рассудку называют те, в которых оба перебесились.
Like scarlet fever, you get it and get over it. Yeah, I mean, you get your heart broken, maybe something happens, whatever. You get over it, and then you move on with the rest of your life.
Это как скарлатина, ее нужно
You get over the blue pill rage.
пережить. Но если вы хотите и правда почувствовать любовь,
And then they're basically saying, like, listen, if you're going to do it, then ask for forgiveness later, but don't get married on
если вы
this.
хотите и правда
If you really want to know what love feels like,
любовь, то нужно
you should err, then make amends. Uh-oh, this is before we had genetic tests. That's not good.
сначала ошибиться, потом поправиться.
They're trying to tell her, don't screw up your marriage for this guy. Everybody's gossiping. We know you're cheating on your husband. How about you just do the right thing right now and give this up? It's never too late to repent.
Даже после брака? Конечно, никогда не поздно раскаяться.
First you err, then you make amends. So they're trying to give her some good advice. Okay, I'm back. I just wanted to show you guys something to illustrate the time period. Let's go ahead and move forward. All right. We don't stop out here. Nevertheless, there is room for doubt as to whether the new ideal, which became the generally accepted norm for an elite minority, was also practiced in reality. The question arises of whether, in the space of a few decades, people had actually changed so radically behavior patterns that had been successfully cultivated for centuries. I mean, we're going back 2,000 years on this dowry thing. And whether they had replaced the traditional practical criteria employed in the choice of a partner with emotional attributes. Okay, so did we get rid of marriage for reason for marriage for folly? Like, was that what people were actually doing? This essay will address these questions and examine the extent to which the new norm was practiced in everyday life and how quickly it established itself. Friedrich Schlegel's novel, Lucinde, published in 1799, shocked readers with its new conception of marriage. This is, I mean, guys, this is, a little over 200 years ago. That's not that long in the scheme of things. Schlegel objected strongly to the generally prevalent prudishness of the money match marriages of his time. His novels soon came to be looked upon. So basically what we got here is a simp, all right? We got a simp in 1799. He's just like, well, the money marriages, they're bad. I mean, you should be for love, and you got to, demonstrate this. His novels soon came to be looked upon as an attack on the traditional marriage ideal. Schlegel's call for a relationship founded upon sex, along with all this entails, overturned the morals of old Europe. A marriage grounded solely on emotions did not provide a secure foundation. It implied, in fact, that of the eventuality of separation. I mean, we see this all day today, right? People get married because of love. Love conquers all. And then 5 to 7 years later, they're in family court. It implied, in fact, the eventuality of separation, and the demand consequently arose for the legalization and facilitation of divorce proceedings. So people were getting married off love matches, okay? And after like that, when the love wore off, they just became so miserable, probably even more so miserable than people who married for reason, that people started saying, we want to be able to get divorced now because we hate each other so badly. I can't stand to be married to this person anymore. It's funny, in the Anna Karenina series, you actually see that take place. It ends tragically. That's on Moss Film on YouTube. Okay, moving in. Love, as understood by the Romantics, had hardly anything in common with the conventional form of marital love, which involved neither physical surrender nor an increase in sexual desire, but was based instead on clear ascetic principles. Traditional marital love was an act of behavioral duty, right? So this is duty in marriage. This isn't passion. This is duty. Because of the marriage contract. Oh yeah, back when the marriage contract actually was something. And it did not necessarily represent the continuation and further development of inner affection. Okay, so it was about duty to family, upholding what you said you were going to do in the marriage contract, things that actually make sense. This is what they were doing. This is what tradition is. Okay, tradition is not this. Tradition is not this. All right, it's not what the tradcons are saying. All right. Prussia's Domestic Relations Act of 1794 declared procreation and the rearing of children to be the main objects of marriage. At the same time, however, it urged mutual support of the partners. For a literary man such as Jean-Paul, marriage was a resting place, where all he asked of a woman was that she cook well, keep him company, and comfort him in difficult times. Sentimental love remained banned from marriage, It was condemned by the church as a sinful, illegitimate relationship, and yet considered by others to be the highest form of spiritual union. The people who considered it the highest form are going to be these people right here, okay? That's going to be the love service. The guy, oh, just one, if I may even just hold your hand and get one kiss, it will be but the greatest love, spiritual enlightenment, and emotional fulfillment a man can have. Something like that. You know what I mean? You know how they do it. From France came the saying that any man who wishes to marry his lover must surely intend to hate her. So this is what I'm talking about. People get married for love. They say, screw the dowry, screw what the family wants, screw duty, screw the marriage contract. We love each other, therefore we should be together forever and reach this high spiritual union. And it's such a disaster. Even back then they knew it was a disaster, that there was a saying in France that says, any man who wishes to marry his lover must surely intend to hate her. We actually see this in the Anna Karenina TV series, which I do plan to watch because it's pretty good. I watched it once, but I want to watch it again. Under the influence of English literature, German authors after 1750 began to call for marital love to be recognized not only as a duty, so now we're moving away from duty, this is how they slip it in, but also as a form of friendship. Friendship? No, we're not friends over here, all right? We got something we're working on. All right, it's not about friendship. Nonetheless, it was still a rational form of love that was not intended to be excessive, and that was far from being a folie à deux. At this time, particularly among the pietists, feeling and sensitivity were celebrated with enthusiasm while sensuality robbed the heroes of novels of their senses. Now, this is we have this nowadays, guys. Like, women spend a lot of time reading romance novels. Like, that's a thing. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, guys, I'll look at the chat soon. All right, I want to take us to maybe the next section. At the same time, however, it was still the moral qualities of the loved one which were stressed. Sexuality, in accordance with the precepts of Christianity, Descartes' philosophy, and contemporary sexual awareness, remained excluded as an animalistic trait. The complete union of souls, and not of certain organs, was considered to be the only ideal worth striving for. Thomasius rejected the lecherous tendency towards physical union as a possible reason for marriage and approved only of the steady bond between two hearts. This is what I consider to be a middle ground, from practical to like, okay, but it's not completely passion, but it's still, it's the slow change. With the purpose of producing children in chaste unity. Although it is true that the storm and stress generation favored sensual pleasure and manly virility and scorned the platonic sensitive dreamers, they were only able to change the view of sexuality to a small degree. Their aggressively stated and exaggerated demands continually met with resistance. Doesn't this kind of sound like early feminism? Like, doesn't it kind of sound like woke people now? Like, hey, the pronouns are different now. Like, everybody's like, whoa, hold on. You know what I'm saying? But this is kind of how these things start, and then slowly there's like a small class of people, and then slowly things change. It just kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Okay. Their aggressively stated and exaggerated demands continually met with resistance. Their moral ideals hardly coincided with those decreed by the government, those preached from the pulpit, or those practiced by the majority of the population. So, just so you know, being a romantic and wanting to pursue this in marriage, this was like a radical thing. You know what I mean? This isn't normal. People are like, it's not the practical thing to do. It's not what people would recommend, and it kind of just leads to a disaster. The Romantics' attempt to overcome the dualism of intellect and body, to establish love as a firm component of marriage, and through intimacy, to raise man to a higher degree of perfection, was an ideal to which only a small elite minority could aspire. It did not seem practical for the large majority of people. What could the average citizen make of a marriage that was said to be pure poetry, as Fichte described it, right? And so from the clip we saw, these folks who are indulging this kind of romantic love affair, they are, very high up there. They can maybe afford to do this a little bit, but even they really can't, because if you're higher up there, in my opinion, you just got more to lose, and you just see a bigger disaster happen. Love did not fill an empty stomach. In a world where the nightmare of starvation was omnipresent, anyone who placed great value on love and inner qualities was accused of being an unrealistic dreamer. The numerous books written around the turn of the century that took the choice of partner in marriage as their theme paint a picture of a society torn between extremes, unable to come to a unified position. Some of these emphasized passionate sensual love, others wallowed in emotions other than sexual, and still others disregarded emotions entirely and valued only practical marriage. On the one hand, the Catholic philosopher Franz von Baader declared non-physical love to be eunuch spirituality, and on the other hand, society denounced Schlegel's Lucinde as shameful lasciviousness. In view of the stiff opposition, it is astounding with what speed the Romantics were able to elevate their ideas on marriage to a publicly accepted norm. Despite its elite character, the new conception of marriage did not remain confined to only a few philosophers, lawyers, or writers. During the Restoration period, the marriage concept was indeed freed of its elements of romantic extravagance. It became possible to control as well as reduce moments of decadence through the emphasis on morality. However, the demand to accept love as the foundation of marriage triumphed and the love match became the norm. Hegel, in particular, in his Philosophy of Laws of 1821, urged that transientness and fickleness be banned from marriage, and he advised the legislature to impede divorce proceedings as strongly as possible. Nonetheless, he too accepted love as the basis of marriage. Since the beginning of the 19th century, love had been the central theme of literature. Through the vehicles of trivial novels and folk plays, so this is the media, the new ideals began to influence broad sectors of the population. The sensual, erotic marriage became democratized as the norm. Since 1817, the German encyclopedia Brockhaus has defined marriage as a lifelong relationship between two persons of the opposite sex, which in its perfection is based on love. The speed with which the new norm also became familiar to broad sectors of the population becomes apparent in the proceedings of the marriage court in 18th century Württemberg, which sought to ensure that marriage restrictions were met. Okay. Until the end of the 18th century, many applications for marriage wherein the woman was considerably older than the man were turned down. So yeah, if you were an old spinster, the government might be like, you know what? You probably shouldn't get married. By the second decade of the 19th century, or well, at least not to a younger man, because they probably think, though, this guy has maybe more potential to do something else than marry this woman. By the second decade of the 19th century, however, a marriage permit could be obtained simply by a declaration of being in love. So this is the change. The citizens learned to exploit the new norm for their own interests. The ideas of the French Revolution affected the attitudes of many enlightened rulers towards their subordinates, leading them to respect the latter's earthly freedom and to abolish the restrictions on marriage. Just because the citizens were familiar with the new norm and used it for their own benefit did not mean, however, that they also adhered to it. So this is what's going to be the point of his paper. He's basically saying that the media takes over, the culture changes a bit to kind of accept love and marriage. But then he's going to go through the evidence that we have, the data sets, which is about 1,200 different cases that are registered with the state where both parties register their assets. And he's going to chart this and say, how are people actually getting married? Was there this wild hypergamy, or are people marrying within their financial group? So let's see what happens. Just because the citizens were familiar with the new norm and used it for their own benefit did not mean, however, that they also adhered to it. It is a particularly difficult task to discern any discrepancies between the standard norm and reality in view of the intangible nature of love. In the southern German province of Württemberg, hope I'm pronouncing that right, however, bureaucracy has enabled historians to assess more precisely with statistical methods the development of the love match in society. From the beginning of the 17th century, as decreed by the law of succession, all citizens, rich and poor alike, were required to have a certificate drawn up by a public notary that itemized all the possessions brought into the marriage. Freeholdings, furniture, and intangible assets, accounts receivable and outstanding. For this study, the property inventories, approximately 15,000 single inventories for the period 1648 to 1914. Okay, 15,000. Sorry, 2,500 has to do with one of the other graphs. For this study, the property inventories, approximately 15,000 single inventories of the period from 1648 to 1914, of the small industrial and administrative town of Nürtingen near Stuttgart were examined. Nürtingen is an ideal object of study because of its heterogeneous occupational structure, which provides ample representation of professions from every economic sector. He's saying that this city isn't just like this isn't Dubai, where everybody's rich and that's who's over there. This is a city that you have income stratification, and it shows a clear, definite set of class differences that we can actually study and see how they are interacting. Okay. If we diagram the net values of assets brought into the marriage by both husband and wife in the pre-romantic period, see figure 1, the nominal pairs form a cluster about the nearest fit axis. We can see that people married in accordance with their economic and social status. Okay, so we have hard evidence saying people were practicing not hypergamy, but endogamy, marrying within class. Seldom beneath or above it. Very rarely did anybody have this kind of unbalanced marriage. The marriage market functions strictly in compliance with economic rules. People try to sell themselves at the best possible price and buy themselves in at a bargain price. As far as possible, all men aimed at marrying wealthy women and all women rich men. This is going to be hypergamy against hypergamy. And when both people are doing this and trying to get the best possible negotiation, it actually checks hypergamy, because then it's like people who are actually about it get the matches, and then it creates positive assortative matching going down the line. So then that's what you actually see in the data set, is when people did get married, they were within the same class. So they're in there trying to negotiate. And I love this part about men aiming to marry wealthy women, by the way. You know what I mean? Because all we're going to hear about today is that, just men just love to provide biologically. Men want to marry the Starbucks cashier. That's just what they want to do. They don't care. Not over here in Germany, just so you guys know. Okay. And women were trying to marry rich men. Okay, that's not new. Nobody wanted to marry below standard because that would have entailed more work. Yeah, it's tougher. More poverty and a shorter lifespan. Since nobody wished to go down the scale, nobody went up either. See, that is the check on hypergamy. When I say dowry is the check on hypergamy, that this is really the only thing that works right here, because everyone's trying to go up. They're trying to prevent going down. This creates a negotiation. There's a back and forth. And then once this gets parsed out, you see hypergamy checked, basically. Since nobody wished to go up since nobody wished to go down the scale, nobody went up either. A partner of equal standing was chosen for marriage. There's your endogamy, or isogamy, I guess you could say. Especially because marrying a rich woman would have diminished the man's dominant position as breadwinner in the house. The marriage strategies of craftsmen, businessmen, and that's an interesting sentence too. That's if she was way richer than him. But if they're around the same, then it makes sense. Then it's even. And that's what they wanted. The marriage strategies of craftsmen, businessmen, civil servants, farmers, and laborers obviously serve to stabilize the social structure of the towns and villages. To marry without consideration of the financial side of the relationship was considered foolish and unrealistic. And it's not just women, like we're talking about men here. But, nowadays, what they'll tell you, whatever, man up, marry these ladies, work 2 jobs if you have to. It's not her job to bring anything. Don't worry about what she brings. It's your job. That's not how it was. And you as a guy would be foolish to do that. And this is the proof positive, even going back then, of that. Foolish and unrealistic. If the new ideal proposed by Romanticism was not only loudly propagated, but also practiced, and if love became the sole legitimate reason for the choice of partner, this would have had a disturbing effect on the objective, decision-making. Oops, let me just get to the next one. Oh, we got graphs. Decision-making process. If love had indeed become more important in choice of a partner, then we should expect to find that the old rigid pattern of behavior had disappeared and that it was now more common for a rich man or woman to marry a poor woman or man. The cluster of dots in figure 1 would not then exist. Okay, so here's, out of these 15,000 inventories or whatever. Actually, let me just go to the down here real quick. So this is the note for figure 1, 2, and 3. It says these inventories were completed by both husband and wife at the time of marriage, as well as in the case of death. Figures 1, 2, and 3 are based on 2,500 marriage inventories selected arbitrarily, okay, at random. Okay, so here is the figure. Let me try to, now, you know, this probably looks a little complicated. Shout out to It's Complicated. But let me just explain this to you. It's not that complicated, okay? So on the one side here, you have, let's say you have women here and men here. I'm not actually sure which one is the X and the Y axis. He actually explains it down here. I'm sorry. Let me just read this first. And then, that's figure 2. Come on, man. Where's figure 1? Cluster of dots. I think on the left is men, and then on the right is women. Yeah, that's actually what it is. That's what it is. I just want to make sure we have that right, because I don't want to tell you wrong and then, you know, feel like a butt later. See right here, women are on the bottom, men are on this side. So yeah, we'll go with that. I think that's what it is here. They should label that more clearly. Anyways, here is wealth, and it's measured in their currency of florins. So it's 100,000 florins. This is what they're coming in at the time. Role of the net financial assets of men and women in relation to first marriage in Nurtingen, 1750 to 1806. So this is first marriages, okay? This is right before the Romantic period. So here's women, and this is coming in with dowries from anywhere from 0 to 100,000 florins, okay? And then this is, you know, men on the other side. And then what you have here is like a perfect split in between. And then the dots are the clusters. Now you have some outliers here. So you got a rich guy here marrying a woman that's not as rich as him, right? She still got some money, but really not that much, okay? Most of the dots, though, are clustered around the middle. And it even looks like there's more dots on the bottom, which is indicating that women were actually bringing in, on average, more money than the men at the time of the marriage. Okay, so just so you see that, that's the evidence. That's what they got. This right here, you know, you got a real rich woman who married an almost equally rich amount of guy. She definitely brought in more money. He brought in a little bit of less, but whatever, you know, whatever their deal was, these people are pretty evenly matched right here. This woman married a very poor man, and she brought most of the money in, looks like, but they're still, you know, pretty low on the scale. Okay. Then what we have here is we have it broken down by trade. So this is for handicrafts and trades. This is for agriculture. And then this is for private services and industry. And he's going to explain this later. But basically what this is saying is that if you were, you know, if you had like a private sector job or something, you would actually be able to marry a richer woman than someone who was like a farmer because they made less or whatever. So that's what the graphs are showing. Okay, well, that was pretty complicated. In fact, nothing of this nature happened in Nurtingen during the entire course of the 19th century. Indeed, quite the opposite occurred. Increasing regional mobility caused the marriage market and with it the number of eligible partners to expand. Marriages up and down the ranks became even less common. The Pearsonian correlation coefficient increased steadily from R equals 0.5 in the second half of the 18th century to R equals 0.7 the end of the 19th century, and even exceeded the value of R equals 0.8 as far as industrial workers are concerned. Anyone who married below his or her station and did not adhere to this economic endogamy, remember that word endogamy, had to suffer the scorn of fellow citizens. See that? This is back, you know, everyone's like, bring shame back. If we're going to bring shame back and it's actually going to work, people, can we bring back the type of shame that they were doing, which was shaming people for not marrying within their class or taking a stupid deal on marriage? That's the kind of shaming I want to see. I want to see them say, why would you marry this woman? She brings nothing. Her family gave her no dowry. You should be ashamed of yourself. Who would do something so stupid? Why would you marry for passion instead of reason? By using a different method, it is possible to show that during the post-romantic period, the choice of partner was still based on the traditional criteria. Traditional being monetary, the money match, okay? If we break the entire sample down into occupational groups, it becomes apparent that other objective determinants besides financial standing were also influential in the choice of partner. This becomes evident if the elongated linear cluster of dots is reduced by means of regression analysis. By using these straight lines, it is possible to reveal the nature of the relationships between the average financial assets of husbands and wives. A comparative study of the economic sectors of handicrafts, agriculture, industry, and private services, that's what we saw, that's the three graphs, reveals that from an economic point of view, a small-scale tradesman was able to marry a more attractive woman than could a poor, small-scale farmer. In the marriage market, the tradesman was superior to the farmer because a woman who married the poorer farmer would have to face a lifetime of hard work that comes in when you're marrying and you guys are in poverty or don't have that much money. In a tradesman's household, however, the woman would at least be exempt from commercial work. In addition, a poor farmer's wife usually had neither a farmhand nor a maid to assist her with the house or field work because the means to pay them were lacking. If given the choice, such a woman preferred the life offered to her by a husband in the commercial or industrial occupations. And when they say a more attractive woman, what they're talking about is a richer woman. All right, and we know that from these graphs because this is measuring financial assets, basically. And it's showing, like, if you're in private services. So let's say if you're in industry, here's the line, and it's below this middle point. So it's basically saying that the women are actually bringing in more wealth at the time of marriage than the guy that's actually doing the trade, because he's going to have an income. You know, his income's going to be looking good into the future. So she's actually coming with the bigger dowry, which is a plus for him as far as a marriage goes. And agriculture, agriculture, it's opposite. So they're marrying women that don't bring in as great as dowries because the women are going to be laboring more, frankly. Right? So when tradcons sell this, the women need to stay home. The man should be working. The only way that works is if they bring in a contribution that's pretty significant. That's how they get that lifestyle, where they get to bake sourdough bread and make cinnamon rolls and do all these other things that they do, like watch TV. Okay. When remarriage is being considered, the process of carefully weighing the individual offers becomes quite apparent. Oh, that's interesting. So we're talking about a second marriages now. A wealthy widower with dependent children could easily find a wife of equal economic standing. Okay, so we're talking about if a guy lost his wife and he has kids, he can still find a wife of equal economic standing. For a poorer widower, so now we're talking about a single mom, but this is if her husband died, so she's still a respectable woman. However, his age and dependent children would make him a widower. Sorry, I think I have this backwards. My apologies, my good sir. Widower, a wealthy widower with dependent children. Okay, no. I don't have it backwards. For a poor widower, it's still about men. It's not the single mom. So both of these are about guys, and then they're going to go into the women. So we're just talking about husbands that are on their second marriage after they lost their wife. A wealthy widower with dependent children could easily find a wife of equal economic standing. For a poor widower, however, his age and dependent children would make him an unattractive prospect. Okay. If this widower operated a business or a farm, he could often not afford the time to be choosy about a partner, or he might face financial losses. See, now this is where the XOF chick comes in. You know what I'm saying? This is where the hoe to the housewife might work if she's got a significant dowry, and he's just like, you know what? I might be able to do that, but this isn't the best prospect for her, but it just depends if she really wanted to do that at this point in her life. If this widower operated a business or a farm, he could often not afford the time to be choosy about a partner, or he might face financial losses. It might then happen that he would propose to the first decent maid who knocked on his door looking for work. This was by no means an uncommon occurrence. Clearly, there were a number of individuals in Nürtingen who did not conform to the majority. The inventories themselves do not reveal the reasons why these people swam against the current. However, if we compared the biographical data and financial situations of these non-conformers with those of the masses, the differences which come to light might well point to possible reasons. One common exception to the rule were 30-year-old men who, for whatever reasons, did not marry and hence found themselves essentially cut off from the marriage market. So this sounds like one of the early bachelor movements. Shout out to those guys. This is like possibly even Proto MGTOW. Those in debt. So that's interesting. So guys who are over 30, they're not clear about the reasons. Maybe at this point they didn't want to get married, or maybe they weren't seen as attractive prospects. But there's no mention about their financial situation. Those in debt. Okay, interesting. So these are the guys in debt. Those in debt had trouble finding partners of equal standing. That would make that makes sense. Even if their actual assets were greater than their liabilities. Interesting. Marriage opportunities were also restricted for people of illegitimate birth. Okay, these are kids outside of a marriage. Similarly, a woman with an illegitimate child had this is your single mom right here. Similarly, a woman with an illegitimate child had difficulty finding a financially attractive partner. Okay, not maybe the biggest surprise. All such persons did not conform to the generally accepted norm and married partners who brought much more or much less into the marriage. And this is showing subsequent marriages. So the first graphs, which I think are the most important, are the first marriages. Okay. Actually, so this one's first marriage, and then it compares it to second marriages. And in the first marriages, women are bringing more of the financial assets compared to the men. So you can see that. That's what out of 1,963 pairings they're looking at. When it was subsequent marriages, so now there's widowers, they have kids. It's not always like that. The man looks like typically going across the scale would bring in more money for second marriages. But it's still not that far off, to be honest. It's just this one tends more towards women bringing more, and this one towards men bringing more at the second marriage. Interesting. Numerous descriptive sources confirm that the above is not an unrealistic interpretation of statistics. One such source are autobiographies, even though the authors of these might not have liked to confess publicly that they acted against the prevailing norm. However, even when they speak of their parents' marriages rather than of their own, they often stop shrouding themselves in nebulous phrases and become much more precise. According to their accounts, marriage had a broad material foundation. Okay, so this is going to be the opposite of the love match. Debits and credits had little to do with romanticism or love. These autobiographies clearly indicate that in all social classes, the focus of interest was the dowry. Okay, so yeah, big shout out to the dowry over here.
What's the dowry situation?
Exactly.
Let's get down to brass tacks here.
Okay. And the assets to be acquired through marriage. So we're talking about dowry as well as assets to be acquired through marriage. Parents with several daughters to marry off acted accordingly. Quite often, the ugliest and laziest daughter was given the largest dowry and was consequently the first to find a husband. So that's actually interesting. It's kind of rare to find mentions of looks when it has to do with this, but that would make sense. They're like, okay, well, we got to figure out something for you, sweetheart. She may not be, she may not be like a model, you know what I'm saying? But she has a very nice dowry on her, which I would urge you to consider, my good sir. And, you and my lovely daughter can have a respectable marriage. Okay. In every social class, the young girls were trained to make a good catch, like young setters at the hunt. However, although everyone was concerned that the price be right, social convention dictated that the element of love must be emphasized first. The people knew very well which ethical norms were valid and which were not, for ministers preached this from the pulpit, teachers taught it in the schools, and it was the subject of novels and marriage guidance books. In our times, one should strive to make marriage in reality what it is supposed to be, to make love the higher spiritual union, the purpose and substance of marriage, to stop marriage from being a mere social security institution, the crass selling of one's own person. This was the propaganda. This advice, typical for the 1850s, dictated the correct form of marriage. Everywhere, love was in general nothing more. So this is what they were selling, but then we can see from the data what people were actually doing, okay? Everywhere, love was in general nothing more than the thin whitewash covering the real material interest. So basically what he's saying is that when you actually look at the brass tacks...
What's the dowry situation?
Okay.
Let's get down to brass tacks here.
When you look at the brass tack, eventually this conversation comes up. Now, since it's becoming vogue to talk about romance and love and to make it seem like you're cultured or whatever, they would give lip service to that. But then when you actually look at the marriages, you see that there was these behind the scenes discussions and negotiations that led to these endogamous pairings because material interests were way more pragmatic and important. So I'm going to read that sentence again. This advice, typical for the 1850s, dictated the correct form of marriage. Everywhere love was in general nothing more than the thin whitewash covering the real material interests. In 1892, Theodore Fontaine described in his realistic novel, Frau Jenny Trebel, the love relations of the average family. This is what he said. They continually liberalize and sentimentalize, but that is all farce. When it is time to show their true colors, gold is the trump card, nothing else. Furthermore, before any marriage, the pluses and minuses of the two partners were carefully weighed. This is the negotiation. Ultimately, a handsome fortune carried more weight than even the prettiest eyes. You hear that? You hear that?
Which one of these broads has the richest father?
Is more important than looks. If anything, they can maybe go down to the tavern. Looks were a dime a dozen. You had a bunch of tavern wenches over there. I don't know what the deal was, but when it came to marriage, it was a different conversation. The autobiographical accounts invariably and shamelessly say nothing about this haggling over money because it was expected that people would abide by the generally accepted norms, especially spiritual values. On this point, other sources, court proceedings and hearings proved to be far more fruitful. From the 19th century, judges wished to form a vivid picture of the accused, the victim, and the witnesses for themselves, and so often asked for detailed descriptions of their lives. In their frequent digressions from the actual subject at hand, those under interrogation often lost their inhibitions and spoke freely about the various aspects of their lives. When the subject of marriage came up, they would explain simply how they met their wives, what initially attracted them to their wives, and why they got married. Because such hearings took place face-to-face or at most in the presence of a third party, it was ensured that the proceedings would not become public knowledge. Consequently, the persons involved had no fear of public disapproval of their materialistic attitudes and hence were inclined to be honest about their motives. As revealed in these court proceedings, romantic ideas had virtually no effect upon the choice of partner. If the partners believed they could get along with each other, the subject immediately came up of financial assets and future inheritance. This is something people are just doing a bad job of, they don't even want to know how much debt the other person is in. But it's like, it's not this thing where it's like, you're going to get married to this person, whether you like it or not. It's like, okay, we kind of like each other, but before we can actually sit here and have, start planning the rest of our life, we do need to have a serious discussion about if this marriage actually makes sense. And that discussion about if this marriage actually makes sense is looking at financial assets, what their future inheritance is going to look like. Then it's like, okay, great. We sort of, it seems like we get along well. This is the courtship process. This is courtship. Then they have this discussion and, if they're endogamously matched, because that's what we see from the graphs. That's how they're pairing up. Then they're going to move forward. Okay. Often people were married without really knowing much about each other. And he's not talking about financial assets. He's talking about the stuff we talk about today, which is just like, oh, well, you should live together before you guys get married. And, you should be comfortable with each other and know all the likes and dislikes and then just see what the triggers and the this and the moods and all this kind of thing. So they would get married and ostensibly stay married for longer. But what was more important to know about was the financial assets and the future inheritance prospect. In 1819, one woman admitted, the school teacher Jacob Reisenfeld came to Hobach and learned from the schoolmaster there that I would make a good match for him. This teacher arranged a meeting between Reisenfeld and myself, at which he declared his intentions to me. I then promised to visit him the following Sunday with my mother. On our visit, we found his household effects amounted to approximately 900 guilders. I mean, this is what it looked like back then, guys. Somebody was like, I think y'all will be a good match. I know her pretty well and her family. And they're respectable. There's a marriage portion for her. So he introduces himself based off this recommendation. She meets him with her mom. The mom asked these questions because it was the mom asking that. They find out he has at least 900 guilders, which is more than florins, I think, which is a significant amount. On our visit, we found that his household effects amounted to approximately 900 guilders. After discussion with my mother and siblings, we got the whole family involved, I decided upon marriage. Okay. If the woman's dowry did not come up to the man's expectations, negotiations with the future in-laws were usually begun, or another bride was sought. Hear that? Sorry. No, it ain't going to work. The deal was done. The deal was done. I mean, you were cool. She's all right. She seems nice, but she didn't really hit what we were expecting for dowry. I mean, this is how many guilders we got over here. We wish you the best of luck. You know, I think I might know somebody that could probably match your financial profile for this marriage. I'll put you in touch with him. I really appreciate the tea that you gave me. You have a lovely home. I really like the curtains. Maybe we'll see each other around, but we do have to be going now. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll read that again. If the woman's dowry did not come up to the man's expectations, negotiations with the future in-laws were usually begun, or another bride was sought. Okay, so this was the offer. They're like, hey, can you do more? This is what I'm coming in with. When, in 1844, a farmhand testified that his assets at the time of his marriage came to 300 guilders, while his bride possessed nothing, the judges voiced the opinion in their private discussion of the case that this man was clearly very naive, or else not quite right in the head. First of all, shout out to these judges. And the sad part about all this is that this is this is most guys. This is how people are being brought up to be, not right in the head. That this guy is incredibly naive. This is what the tradcons want you to be. They want you to be naive. All right. This is even what alpha simp RP pickup artist type guys want you to be a little bit naive. Well, you know, because the biological determinism and all this stuff, the woman and the man wants to be and then the naturally and all these kinds of things, and the man disposable, and woman and the sperm is not, you know, the eggs and the sperm values and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so just so you know, I'm gonna read this again. Shout out Elena, I see you in there. Thanks for coming in. Also, I showed that Anna Karenina clip. You might like that. When, in 1844, a farmhand testified that his assets at the time of his marriage came to 300 guilders, while his bride possessed nothing, the judges voiced the opinion in their private discussion of the case that this man was clearly very naive, or else not quite right in the head. So, right, so this is an indication of what the rest of the community is like right here, okay? People see something like this, and they're like, something's wrong with this guy. The picture of the, and you know, that's kind of what love does, right? Like when you let passion take over like that, it makes you kind of not quite right in the head. You know, the reasoning faculties start to not do what they're, you know, supposed to be doing up here. Okay. The picture of the marriage market that these court proceedings give resembles a loud Oriental bazaar more than the quieter German weekly market. In the marriage market, depending on social rank, the trading was done verbally and marks and pennies were haggled over. One bidder was played off against another in order to get, this is the marriage market, and get the best possible offer. That is the highest possible dowry.
What's the dowry situation?
Exactly.
Let's get down to brass tacks here.
There you go. Seen from another perspective, the girl threw the dowry over the man like a lasso in order to capture him. Okay? And that's from Leroy Ladurie. Interesting. And nowadays, I mean, you know, they're coming in with nothing out here. Men are sitting here having to be gaslighted. Officer Tatum's telling people that, you know, well, if one job ain't enough, then you got to get 2 jobs. You got to get 2 full-time incomes. So she doesn't have to worry about working. One example from the court proceeding illustrates the bargaining that went on to find a suitable spouse. In 1864, a financially secure shopkeeper named Anton Schmucker from a small village outside Stuttgart testified that for several years before his marriage, he had carried on a relationship with one Therese Schlee, the fruit of which was 2 illegitimate children. Because Teresa was not rich enough for him. See that? These folks had 2 kids out of wedlock, and he refused to marry her because this woman had no dowry. He was like, oh, hell no. I ain't going to be seen around town. You know, I don't want to be looked at as like I'm not right in the head. I'd rather have 2 bastards than get married to a broke woman. Okay. Because Teresa was not rich enough for him, Schmucker hired a day laborer to go to a neighboring village to an innkeeper's daughter who was said to possess financial assets of 3,000 guilders. When his proposal was turned down, he hired an old weaver to inquire of a girl in another village who was said to possess 1,800 guilders, a cow, and a dowry. Okay, wow, we got the cow in here too. If she would like to marry Schmucker, okay? When asked why he did not marry Teresa, who had borne him 2 children, he replied that her parents had not given her a large enough dowry. Once his second proposal in the neighboring village was rejected, he demanded 2,000 guilders from Teresa's parents as a dowry. They only wanted to give 800 guilders, and eventually the sum of 1,000 guilders was agreed upon. In this way, the marriage finally came to be. Okay. Well, shout out to them. Negotiation won the day. The parents finally saw it. They're like, okay, you know what? Let's make our daughter respectable out here. We'll pay the 1,000 guilders. We're going to talk to grandma and grandpa and see what, if they can, check the purse a little bit. Of course, not everyone. My bad, guys. I'll get the chat in a bit. Yo, shout out Ahmed Motaseb, man. Shout out to you, man. Thanks for being here, bro. Appreciate you. I love your sound effects. Thank you, Elena. Appreciate that. Murder of Crows, I see your comments, man. Forgive me, man. I'm going to try my best to go back and look at those. Of course, not everyone discussed the money aspect so openly. Those from good homes, these are going to be your old money, avoided such scenes. Such people might have chosen less direct methods and used a different code in their bargaining, but the intent was nonetheless the same. Anyone who was comfortable financially could afford to sneer at this materialistic way of thinking and behaving. This is where your romantics come in. However, in a time when, for a woman, marriage was the only appropriate, socially accepted means for securing a livelihood and existing, because if it ain't that, I mean, you're gonna have to go try to be a maidservant, join a convent, or the brothel next to the tavern, behind the tavern. You might want to see what's going on over there. We read that in the Saint Nick story. So yeah, if you want to avoid that, this is going to be more respectable. And when a sizable dowry was essential for a craftsman to be able to open up a business and guaranteed solvency and borrowing power to a young businessman, and in a time when the additional money from a dowry provided a welcome supplement to a civil servant's modest salary, the weight of the purse was clearly very important. This is a very important paragraph because it's showing you how the dowry was used and the expectations around the dowry. And guys, this is barely 200 years ago. Like, it's less than 200 years ago in some of these instances. So these folks, they're showing potential. They have these skills. They're going to be able to do this. And they're looking for a woman with a significant dowry. So they're using the dowry as an investment into the young men to set up the future of this new household. And when a sizable dowry was essential for a craftsman to be able to open up a business, so imagine you're a young guy, you get married, the father-in-law is like, okay, we're going to set you up with $250,000, set up your business, okay, you're a young, whatever it happens to be, get your own firm going, whatever. And that's what it's going to be. This is what the contract looks like. We're going to add stipulations in the contract where if you don't actually do what you're saying you're going to do, then this is going to be a problem for you. And when a sizable dowry was essential for a craftsman to be able to open up a business and guaranteed solvency and borrowing power to a young businessman, and in a time when the additional money from a dowry provided a welcome supplement to a civil servant's modest salary, the weight of the purse was clearly very important. While those from the upper classes focused their interest on hundreds and thousands, the lower classes fixed theirs on pennies. Okay, this is another important point, because what people are going to say is, well, only the rich did dowries. That's only something the rich people did. The rest of them were doing love, no, it's actually not that. It's from top to down. They're all concerned about this. Okay, they're all looking at this. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to explain the only minor differences in financial assets between husband and wife, particularly among factory workers. Even the workers paid strict attention to hierarchy within their own social class. A skilled worker would attempt to secure his superior social standing over an unskilled worker by marrying appropriately. Okay, we're almost there, guys. We're at page 11, guys. Look, we almost made it. See, it wasn't that bad. Reading papers is fun. Isn't reading papers great? Like, this is entertaining. This is what isn't this a nice change to just reacting to other people's stuff? All this does not mean that. Okay, you know what? I'm going to show you guys another clip. I get it. You know, yeah, we've been looking at a bunch of text on the screen. Let me pull up another clip for y'all, just to give you guys a little something. I know you guys want to see it. And this next clip is coming from the Count of Monte Cristo movie. No, it is not from the American version with that one guy. Jim Caviezel is his name, I think. Also a good movie, though with a few historical inaccuracies, and kind of ends very different from the actual book, which I have on my shelf, but it's out of arm's reach currently. The French, where this novel actually originates, actually made a movie last year. So it's a new French version of Count of Monte Cristo, and it's in French, and we have subtitles, so everybody's gonna be okay. Okay. Yes, no, I don't want to continue where I left off. Okay. All right, legends. Let's check this out. Just forward it a tad bit. Okay, this is our count. Legends. Okay, tight. Whoa. Okay, this is the part I want you to pay attention to. We got a family in a carriage, okay? We got the mom, we got the dad, and we got the son. Okay, and they're going to be having a conversation in there. And this is going, again, to kind of demonstrate how people had marriages of reason and what they were thinking. Now, of course, some of this is propaganda, and they're going to cast a little bit of a bad light on this, but I want you guys to see this. You know what? I'm going to get my myself out of the way just so you guys can really just get immersed in this and enjoy this. All right, legends. Okay, there's dad. All right, there's mom. Oh, by the way, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Hope you guys are having a good one. There's the son, okay? That's going to be our son, Albert. I think that's Albert, yeah.
Ça va mieux?
Feeling better? He's like, yeah. Whatever. Let me talk about some business right now. Oh, yeah. You know what, Ahmed, I think it's okay. All right, whatever. Let's just do that. You're right, man. See that? Oh, man, I hate it when it does that. Something about bitrate. See that? So he's saying you weren't very considerate with Eugenie Danglars. I watched how you were talking to this nice single woman over there, and I didn't like the attitude you were taking with her. So this is what he's saying. You weren't very considerate with Eugenie Danglars. He's like, Dad. You see what he just said? 2 millions. She will have a dowry of 2 million on her wedding day. He's basically sitting there and he's just like, do I need to smack you? And you're like, pow! What the hell is wrong with you? Did you not hear that she has 2 million? And you're over here you're upset? Something's wrong with you? Use your freaking brain. Let's go ahead and play that again.
Je t'ai pas trouvé très attentionné avec la petite Eugénie Danglars. Père, elle aura 2 millions de dot le jour de son mariage.
Fernand.
Now listen to what the mom says. This is where the gynocentrism comes in. This is how the feminism snuck in. This is where the propaganda is in the film.
C'est donc moi, Eugénie, qui a sa fortune, que je dois faire attention.
Crois-moi, aujourd'hui, mieux vaut une médaille en moins et un zéro de plus.
All right, listen to what mom says.
Notre fils.
Our son is a man of his time. He is a romantic who believes in...
C'est un homme de son temps. C'est un romantique qui prend le...
Okay, yeah, then the movie goes on from there, and it's all relatively interesting. You guys should check it out. It's a good movie. I like the movie. But yeah, so this clip really exemplifies some of the stuff we're talking about, right? So this is the changeover. This is how it's going from marriages of reason to marriage of folly. The dad's sitting in there, you know, actually thinking straight. And he's just like, hey, you might want to consider how you're acting in there and maybe show a little bit more respect and attention to this respectable young woman who also has a dowry of 2 million, okay, that she's going to be given on her wedding day. I mean, you might want to, you know, think about how you're talking over here. And then the son's like, but dad. And then the mom's like, oh, yeah, he's one of these new romantic kind of guys or whatever. So anyways, yes, we looked at a clip, guys. Okay, back to the text. We're like a page and a half away, okay? All this does not mean that in the 19th century, love and marriage for love was purely the invention of writers and had no place in real life. There was a small, elite, free-floating minority whose secure financial position allowed them to strive for any ideal. Most writers belong to this minority. They viewed the otherwise so it's the people, you know, and largely they're probably controlling the media. They're these kind of eccentric personalities, and they're shaping the culture here. Elena says, was this clip from the movie of 2002? No, this is actually from a newer version of it. You know what? Let me pull that up just to give it some shine. Count of Monte Cristo. You know, was that 2024? It's this one right here. It's the 2024. Wait a minute. Yeah, 2 hours and oh, damn it. I can't remember if it's this one or the. Yeah, I think it's this one. It's this one. There's two of them. This is a different one. This is the TV show. They made. So the crazy thing is they made 2 Count of Monte Cristos in 2024. One of them is a French movie, and then the other one is like a TV show. And I don't know if that one was made in France. This is the 3-hour movie one. just to clear that up as clear as possible. Also, guys, if you're interested, I have a second paper that's a lot shorter. It's 3 pages. It's an article news clipping, but only if you guys want. I'm not going to torture you guys the whole night with papers, though it would be kind of fun. Anyways, all this does not mean that in the 19th century, love and marriage for love were purely the invention of writers and had no place in real life. There was a small, elite, free-flowing minority whose secure financial position allowed them to strive for any ideal. Love needs to be financed, gentlemen. Love ain't free out here. Most writers belong to this minority. They viewed the otherwise hardly practical dictates of the Romantics as an existential guide. I kind of see these guys as people who come from maybe families that gave them a huge inheritance, or they're maybe like the last living, or just there's some kind of strange thing about their family. They don't really care to get married. They're eccentrics. They got a huge inheritance or something, and they're like, whatever, let me just indulge in romantic love, and I don't want to have I mean, you know, maybe they don't care that much or something, or maybe they do want to get married and they're willing to bet it all. Okay, you know what? I'll put it as a poll. How about that? Start a poll. Do you guys want to read the newspaper clipping about dowry? Okay, yeah. I am going to cut the stream a little bit shorter just because I got to get up early tomorrow, and, you know, it's Sunday, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do too. Okay. They viewed the otherwise hardly practical dictates of the Romantics as an existential guide. Love was a threat to the social hierarchy. However, because it threatened to dissolve the relatively firmly established social structure. Fairy tales sometimes came true. It did happen, even if only rarely, that a young aristocrat married a young dancer. Okay, sounds like a very rich guy. I don't know if this is what a stripper was back then. I mean, maybe not. But it definitely seems like that kind of variance. You know, you got a young guy from a noble family. He's an aristocrat. All right, that means money. And then there's a woman, and I don't know what kind of dance show she was at, but she made it happen. The court proceedings occasionally report such things. Occasionally. From the end of the 19th century on, the working class also tried to realize the ideal that the family should be founded upon love. Okay, so this is the democratization of love here. By this time, the lower classes had learned to read and write. So see, now they're reading romance novels. They're reading The Count of Monte Cristo. They're reading Anna Karenina. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh my God, like these stories and the media and the propaganda, we want to be like the characters. By this time, the lower classes had learned to read and write and tried at times to carry out what they had read about in cheap novels. Okay? This is your romance novels. However, they first had to discover that love, as had already been warned in the 18th century, was a conflict-ridden affair. Probably why they also made good stories. Many experienced that in the course of the daily arduous struggle to survive, passion could quickly turn into quarreling and hate. And we knew that from that French quote earlier about if you decide to marry in love, if you just decide to get married because of love, I hope you're intending on hating that person. Okay. Many experience that in the course of the daily arduous struggle to survive, passion could quickly turn into quarreling and hate. Even though love stories such as that of Cinderella and The Prince also figured into the daydreams of the peasants, they seem to have been more conscious of these fairy tales. In other words, it was quite different in reality for them. One married according to one's wealth, social standing, and prestige. That's endogamy. This is the check against hypergamy. The rural population were indeed familiar with such figures of the imagination, but they followed the dictates of experience, which were lacking among the young urban workers who were without traditions. The Romantics aroused expectations that could not be met given the realities of 19th century life. They forgot that marriage was not based only on love, that another essential element must be present. I wonder what that is.
What's the dowry situation?
Exactly.
Let's get down to brass tacks here.
Love could not fill empty stomachs. The Romantics, and we see so many stories of like people's marriages and stuff breaking down, especially with like manosphere stuff, red pill stuff, when finances go down and, oh my gosh, like suddenly the wife of who they thought loved them unconditionally is, filing for divorce or whatever. And, they're going through a rough patch. I mean, even some people get rich and then the wife files for divorce too, because, they're trying to cut and run basically with the payday. But here we go. Love could not fill empty stomachs. The Romantics proceeded from a reality that simply did not exist for the majority of the population. We even see this with like the TikTok trend of like trad wives, and it's like usually these like very rich women, and it's just not possible for most normal people. But people see that and they romanticize that. And it's just on a practical level, it's just not what it is. The Romantics proceeded from a reality that simply did not exist for the majority of the population. In addition, they provided no guidelines for everyday love and no advice about handling conflict, probably why it's better left in the romance novels. Moreover, because the ideal of the bourgeois family specified that love and marriage were considered subordinate to moral duty, there was no escape once love began to wane. The backdoor escape of divorce was locked. In the 19th century, most people did not seriously attempt to exchange their traditional patterns of behavior for the fantasies created by utopian writers. Because etiquette demanded it, they imitated the bourgeois affectations about sensuality and the union of souls. According to the rules of the game, they feigned what those above held to be proper. So they were pretending, they're like, whatever, let's just do this to kind of fit in, but really we're concerned about these things. They feigned what those above, quote unquote, held to be proper, but remained primarily interested in the business aspect. And it's funny, because earlier in the paper, he talks about how people in the lower classes are more apt to have these discussions, but that even people from the higher classes, when you look at the data, they're still marrying endogamously. It's just that they're having their discussions behind closed doors. So even though they're looking at people above them who are making these declarations of love, but really behind closed doors, even the rich people are looking at the material aspect the same way. So it's kind of ironic. Or it's just, it's really strange. They feigned what those above held to be proper, but remained primarily interested in the business aspect. If the situation became critical, roles were soon changed. In addition, and this was particularly the case in southern Germany, I'm going to say it wrong. Like, I want to say the word magistrate. The magistracy, with its legal restrictions on marriage for those without means. Wow, they actually had legal restrictions if you didn't have means. That means not having a dowry. And probably also for men on the other side, no income, had long been drilling the primary importance of money into the people's heads, and they had learned their lesson well and not forgotten it. And another thing is, there's no robust welfare state to come here and save the day. At best you got, I would say the church and probably charity through that way, but life was still tough enough to where this wasn't an option that like everybody can do. Maybe some small amount of people the community can afford to help if they needed it. But this, there's no safety net for everybody over here. So people have to make these very pragmatic decisions. Furthermore, the bourgeoisie, who in the beginning of the century avidly pursued the new ideal as it were a new fashion trend, had quickly learned that bringing greater intimacy into marriage was a difficult feat. Wow, okay, so even they learned their lesson. Like, we got to go back to marrying with some sense here. In 1845, the writer Johann Nestroy gave the following ironic description of the experience of his fellow men in this area. The nice thing about love is that one can stop loving when one no longer enjoys it. But marriage, the awareness that one is married forever, that is enough to do one in. And of course, that's back when they had like at-fault divorce and things like that. And there was actually this is in Germany. I don't even think they had at-fault over here. Like over there, it was just annulment at the time. So you really were, the whole I do and till death do us part was actually a thing back then. But then you get at-fault divorce in the US, and then you get no-fault divorce. So, no-fault divorce is really designed for screwing people once they take the love match, so to speak. You throw caution to the wind. You don't care if it's kind of a hypergamous deal here. She doesn't have anything. I mean, even women do this on the other end, like Tinder swindler type stories and things. And then you guys get married, and at least in at-fault times, it's like, well, fine, okay, this guy brought everything, she brought nothing, but divorce wasn't something they just handed out. But now at no fault, it's like, well, sorry, here's your alimony, here's your child support. Give us half your retirement. House is getting split up too. And a bunch of other things. So yeah, that's how that goes. Okay, last page, guys. Look, we made it. We made it. The foregoing does not mean that 19th century Germans were simply puppets manipulated by economic circumstance, but a sound financial position was clearly important for a marriage so that love could develop freely. This necessitated a reduction of long working hours, which meant that the concern about economic survival no longer held sway over the heart. Intimacy could become long-lasting if the general standard of living reached a higher level. In an age dominated by poverty, it was not possible to democratize romantic love and the love match. The code of love as a new form of interpersonal relationship which stimulated the development and expression of emotions needed a longer time to take hold. As long as all the necessary prerequisites were not present, people preferred to take to heart the experiences of earlier generations rather than the vague promises of a socially aloof minority. And thus in 19th century Germany, one did not marry for love, even if toward the end of the century one did marry more often with love. Like, yeah, love can be in the vehicle, but who's driving this thing is not love. Of primary importance was money. All right?
What's the dowry situation?
Exactly.
Let's get down to brass tacks here.
And then, depending upon character and one's particular situation in life, love followed as an afterthought. Yeah, so love takes a back seat here, guys. The important stuff is to figure out these practical things. And this is like, you guys hear me say, like, I like to walk them down the line a bit, which is like, hey, where's this going? Don't you want to settle down? And you're like, haven't you ever thought of marriage? Don't you want to get married someday? And you could say, yeah, marriage is a beautiful thing. Like, what does marriage look like to you? And it's like, oh, a house and 2 kids. And you're like, okay, interesting. What's the average house around here? Like $500,000. 2 kids are like maybe on the low end, like $250,000 if you actually want to, kind of do things the maybe accepted proper way as far as their upbringing goes. That's $1 million, right? And we're not even talking mortgage interest. I'm just talking about the price. Like, I mean, forget all the extra. You can really easily get this up to 1.5 million, maybe even close to 2, depending. So when they say that, then it's like, okay, so what's the plan to attack this $1.5 million enterprise that you want to embark on with me? And if the answer is, well, I want to be a stay-at-home mom and make cinnamon rolls and sourdough bread, and I'm 29 and I haven't saved any money, even though I have a college degree, and, well, no, I've never talked to my parents about this. Actually, my parents are divorced, and I don't know, I don't really talk to my dad so much because my mom taught me to not like my dad and said he was a terrible, abusive person, and I don't know what happened to him, and my mom's in Florida now. She married some other guy. They're actually going through a divorce right now. It's a little strange. It's kind of a long story. I'll tell it to you sometime. Well, then, yeah, that marriage isn't going to work. See what I mean? You're getting, okay, so what about this $2 million that we're trying to figure out here? What about this $1.5 million? What about just $1 million over this next? What do you do for a living? Can I see your credit report? Instead, you know, some guy, blue-pilled, will just sign this document, not realize the other person has a bunch of student loan debt that they never knew about. Okay, it's not their debt, but, you know, if she's making any money, it's going to all go to that. Interest is raising on it. I mean, you got to have these conversations, and you have to, you know, protect yourself and have that checkup to check against hypergamy, especially if you're doing well. Okay, yeah, shout out to these folks. Shout out to Peter Wright of gynocentrism.com for giving me this article. I really appreciate him sending that to me. Shout out to Peter Borscheid, the legend who wrote this. The editors of the Journal of Family History wish to thank Claire A. McMillan for her considerable editorial work in the preparation of this article. Shout out to the proud German folks out there who I appreciate your pragmatism and your meticulous documentation of a man and a woman's assets at the time of marriage. That allows us nowadays to be like, we got a beautiful paper right here. We got solid evidence. I mean, we got a data set that tells us who's getting married and how much money they had. Like, that's beautiful. This is fantastic. This is amazing. Let me just catch up with chat real quick, and then we will move on to the newspaper clipping, who also I need to credit Peter Wright for sharing that with me, which is Dowries for Daughters. And this was in the Sydney Morning Herald on Thursday, December 18th, 1890. So that's going to be the bonus material for today, guys. Oh, yeah, the poll says 83% of folks want me to read it. Okay, well, 2 hours. Yeah, I'll probably take us to like 2 hours and 30 minutes. And, you know, it's like 3 pages. It is single-spaced. But here we are. Let me just get to chats real quick. I think I'm, you know, guys, I'm probably not going to be able to go back. I don't think I missed any super chats. I probably would have noticed it. I got JP's super chat. Thank you, JP. Appreciate you, man. Where did I leave off? Spoiler. Oh no, the spoiler. Anna ends up as mincemeat. Yeah. Well, it ends up as a tragedy. It's okay. Maybe you can share how you know that info so Shah can read you, bro. There happens to be a very good movie with Mr. Monroe, one of... Oh, okay, no. M. Monroe, like Mademoiselle or Madame Monroe, one of her early ones that spells all of the whole I'm so in love downfall starkly. I'm going to find it right now. Saw it last year. Okay. The Monroe movie is Clash by Night, 1952. It's sad and tragic. Y'all are forewarned. I'll have to check that. Thanks for the movie recommendation. Let me actually write that down. I'm a big fan of stuff like that. There was a movie that Elena had recommended to us. It's a Russian movie called The Cruel Romance, and it's actually based off of a play about what happens to a woman without a dowry. And that's also on YouTube also, so you guys might like that. Monroe Clash by Night. 1952. Thank you, Murder of Crows. Okay, here it is right here. Huh. Yes, looks like a classic right here. Noir romance. Awesome, man. Thank you. Notice how it's all about avoiding any kind of work. Is it just me? Well, yeah, when it comes to the paper and them trying to like marry higher up. But how long could one beat back the Tyrones or Chads from one's OF bride? Would she not be overempowered and scale with her OF bank? Yeah, I guess it depends how you look at it. I mean, if the chance of getting divorced is about the same as if you marry the dowryless woman who's a virgin, I mean, it might be worth taking the OF deal, because if you guys end up getting divorced, at least you're shielded from the worst effects of it. Then it's like, well, okay, this happened. Now, it still sucks to go through a divorce, and, you know, if there's kids involved, it's only worse. But it sucks more to go through a divorce where there's kids involved and your virgin wife cheated on you, and you also have to pay alimony and child support into that, instead of, you know, maybe both parties walking away or there being some sort of more even split. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. The cow. Yeah, shout out to the cow. I'll have to rewatch this live stream from the beginning. Oh, no worries. I appreciate that. Shout out to Ahmed Motseb. You have to hustle for her to have a comfy life. I love your sound effects. No worries. MS, yo, shout out to MS. I think I haven't seen you in a while. Dowry is a check on hypergamy. Fascinating. Yes, very much it is. And that paper we just read, sounds like that's probably the part we were at in the paper that discussed that. What if a girl had a sizable dowry but was really ugly back then? Would a guy reject her and marry a prettier girl, but with a slightly lesser dowry contribution? Well, what's funny is that this paper addressed that, and it said that he uses the word ugly and laziest. I don't know why he threw in laziest in there, but maybe. But he said the ugly and laziest daughters usually had bigger dowry. So this is what would be a kind of counterbalance. So if the woman is particularly attractive, she can get away with less of a dowry, but completely no dowry, and that's not a respectable marriage at that point. I love reading. Same here. I do wish I could do it more, sometimes. Caesar Quintana says, Shah covered the story of the Catholic Orthodox St. Nicholas. Oh, yeah, Elena, if you do rewatch the stream, I think you'll enjoy the origin of the Christmas stocking and what it has to do with dowries and also pay for play. Ahmed says, maybe put your watermark. Oh, yeah, I remember that. Was this a clip? Oh, I don't know if you wanted me to take the watermark out or put it on there. Oh, I know what you're talking about. You mean the grid. I'm so sorry. Now I understand what you meant. Well, I think we're all right. We made it. They were short clips, too. Like, they were barely like a minute. Dough is franc for dowry in English. Yeah, I mean, ancient Rome, they called it what was it? Dos, I think. In French, it's like D-O-T. And then, yeah, it becomes dowry in English. Looks like dot for franc is probably an earlier form, and that kind of seems more similar to the French one. So that's pretty cool. Elena says, I watched the one of 1955 in Russia. It was really good. I'll have to check that out. I'm not sure which one you're referring to, if it was Monte Cristo. I love reading papers. I don't mind, but you guys decide. MS says, so romantic marriages became a thing once the European lower classes became literate by the end of the 1800s, right? Yeah, and this is, Peter Wright does a great job of kind of explaining how a lot of this stuff comes into being. And, it goes back even up until I think like the end of the 11th or 12th centuries or so. So this is where chivalry starts to change, and from, purely militaristic and, about knights and entering into the service of a lord. And then it gets kind of co-opted and maybe hijacked. And then you start to have a thing called love service, where, a knight would enter into the service of a lady, and he would do these feats for her, and there's a whole thing there basically. But that was only like a very, very, very small amount of people in the court, and not that many people were literate back then, right? I mean, the printing press doesn't come around, I think, until late 1400s, Gutenberg. And so it still takes time for literacy to increase, and then you have economy getting better, obviously. Colonization, things like that, starting to change Europe. Then you get, industrialization, modernization, and that's what the folks that are kind of in the time period we were talking about today are encountering. So these ideals, I guess, these romantic ideals and romantic chivalry that were already kind of existing in the sort of substratum of the European, collective mind there, starts to become more accessible to people because they either have more money to indulge in this, more people are literate, books are cheaper to get, they're cheaper to produce, people are romantic love novels are spreading like wildfire. I read somewhere that when the printing press was made, like, I think two of the most popular books, one of them was the Bible, but it wasn't just the Latin Vulgate Bible, it was the Polyglot Bible. So on the one hand, you'd have your Latin here, which not many people could read. You were probably very educated if you could do that. But then on the other side of the page, you'd have your, like common German or whatever language. So you'd have, Martin the blacksmith and Otto the farmer, and at nighttime they might be reading their polyglot Bible, and then they're like, oh, this is interesting, it actually says this, but they're not reading it in Latin. So anyways, that was one thing. The other kind of book was these tales of chivalry, these like chivalric knights entering into love service and doing all these kinds of feats, and that kind of evolves into the sort of romance novels. And these novels are spreading like wildfire. I mean, they're going all across, any like European place. They're going to the New World. People liked them. This is changing the public consciousness. People still, I mean, a lot of the stuff still stays in stories, but as people start to get more money, you know what I mean? And then they start saying, okay, life starts changing. Then we head into more recent times. Like put your, like let's say you're a boomer after World War II. Like put yourself in an economy like that. The TV, there's romance films. Like just imagine what they're seeing. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, let's say, you can choose to be this pragmatic about marriage, but if you can get a house for a relatively affordable amount on one income, and you got at-fault divorce, which is at least something that makes sense, you might be more willing to say, hey, let's get married for love. You know what I mean? This is what we see. And what I'm basically saying is that as we move into this kind of new economic era where the fruits of modernization have been kind of primarily consumed, I mean, population's pretty large now, all these kinds of things. Houses are very, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Things cost a lot of money. Romance is dead, so to speak. The dating market's monetized. Shout out to Coach Greg Adams. Some of these considerations are probably going to start coming back onto the fray here. So yeah, good question. That was a good question, man. Appreciate that. Nick says, nothing is wrong with either as long as both parties are on the same page and establish rules from the beginning. Well, as long as the rules can also be enforced. But if people establish rules and then one person says, well, time to no fall out of here, then what good are the rules? Murder of Crows says, it's simple as only dowries can properly settle a man in his masculine energy. Ooh, I like that. Ain't no marriage successful without it. Most aren't even with it, too. Yeah, shout out to you, man. I like that comment a lot. Very true. And I like that about this article because it gave us a little bit more information about how dowries are used practically to set up the family for success. Ahmed Motaseb says, I made 2 Christmas dowry songs as per Peter Wright's request. Posted on the Discord. Got it. Man, I'll have to play some of those. I think Mr. Pitt added some too. Don't switch. Oh, nice. Dowry for Christmas. The dowry song, I don't want a lot for marriage. And then we got the ballad song, I think what Murder for Crows asked for. Elena says, I meant the Count of Monte Cristo of 19... Oh, I didn't know there was a Russian version. I actually would want to watch that. I do like watching the Count of Monte Cristo movies. Got it. Nice. Murder Crows says, is the Discord invite only? Pray tell, what's the secret boys only password? It's actually in the description. Did you check the invite in the description? I swear I think I updated it. It should work. It should work. If the description invite doesn't work, let me know and I'll post you a new invite. Nick says, do you think prenups and mandatory DNA tests can be legislated regarding birth certificate authenticity? I don't know if they will be legislated anytime soon, maybe. I mean, we had that Brett Fairley guy in Mississippi who's going to be meeting with legislators in Mississippi, and maybe they'll end up doing something like that. I guess the toughest part in the law is how the law recognizes marriage still. And I don't know if they would feel that mandatory genetic testing would get in the way of marriage's place in our legal framework. Now, that being said, you are always entitled to a genetic test, but getting it is a little bit of a chore because only one genetic test counts, and that's the one that the child support agency gives you, because that one's the official one the court's going to recognize. You can do a private test, but it's not going to hold legal weight. And if you're a guy and you're married and presumption of paternity applies, the only way to do that is you'd have to go into the child support agency and say, hey, my wife's at home. I came here by myself secretly, and I have suspicion that I'm not the father. Can you guys please open a case against me? Or if you didn't want to do that and you wanted to pay a little bit more money, you can file a private action basically a paternity action with your local family court there, private family court. And what they would have to do basically is order the genetic test. They'd probably send you across the street to the child support agency, and then you'd have to do that. And you have to do all this before 2 years, by the way. So, I mean, yeah, it's a little easier to not be married and not sign paperwork and just say, hey, come after me, or open a case against yourself, ironically, at a child support agency and get the genetic test. So, I mean, yeah, would it be a hell of a lot easier if they just did the test at the hospital? Yes, it would be. As far as political will to get this done, I mean, I wish I can say it's there, but it just doesn't seem that way. You know what I mean? But, you know, hey, maybe. Thank you, Mr. Pitt, for putting that Discord invitation link in there. Actually, I really appreciate you, man. Okay, well, guys, we're at 2 hours, 14 minutes. I'm going to try to go and start reading this now. And, you know, then we'll go ahead and call the stream. This might be a little ambitious, but this is basically somebody making the case in the Sydney Morning Herald newspaper in 1890. So these are people that are seeing this change in this kind of romantic era and people kind of moving away from things. And it's going to give us a little bit more insight into that time period of you know, how things were changing and where people's minds were. So let's go ahead and get into this, guys. Sorry, but it's going to be a lot more white background. I was trying to get some kind of filter to put on this. Like the filter of these glasses makes the paper look like this nice parchment color for me. But for you, you're looking at a white screen, and that really sucks. Dowries for daughters. As a rule, we in England pride ourselves on the fact that so far as our domestic life is concerned, we have little or nothing to learn from other countries. So that when we hear an eminent French statesman and man of letters attacking two of the most cherished institutions of French life and contrasting them unfavorably with our own customs, our self-complacency is neither startled nor flattered, but merely feels that it is receiving its proper due of recognition and confirmation. Nevertheless, if we weigh the utterances of Monsieur Jules Simon more carefully, we shall probably find greater reason in them for self-reproach than for self-praise. They really wrote in a flowery way back then. But he's saying, you know, it makes the English ego and pride feel good when you hear a French guy kind of talking smack about their own customs and saying, oh, you Englanders are so interesting, and wow, that's actually pretty cool. But when it's the other way around, they don't really like it, but they're trying to make the case that, hey, maybe sometimes when the French look at us or the Germans look at us and say the way you English do things, because the English are the first to really adopt this stuff and take it to the next level, by the way. This author's basically saying maybe there's something we can learn here if we can just get past our sort of pride, you know, our pride, basically. The two institutions with which this gentleman finds fault are the enforced division of the patrimony among all the children and the daughter's dote. This is going to be the dowry, which is considered so obligatory on the parents and has to be scraped together with such pains and personal sacrifice on their part. Listen, that's how much of it was. When you have a family and you have a daughter, families worked very hard to save up. I mean, from when this daughter is born, this is on their mind. You know, our daughter needs to get married someday. We need to make sure she's prepared for that. We need to make sure she has something to go with, something to offer. We love our daughter. We want her to be respectable and to at least have a lifestyle that we have, if not better. You know, this is what they're going to try to do, depending on how much they can save. And this is the honor of a family in that way. The first of these questions does not affect us. Oh, excuse me. And the daughter's dote, which is considered so obligatory on the parents and has to be scraped together with such pains and personal sacrifice on their part. The first of these questions does not affect us. We have no reason to regret that the arbitrary division of property into equal shares does not exist among us. And we should be disposed to go even further than Monsieur Jules Simon in advocating a freedom of apportionment on the part of the father, basically saying you can write your will however you want. But as regards the dote, this is the dowry, so far from congratulating ourselves, we cannot help feeling a certain sense of shame that the necessity of making some kind of provision for the daughters of a family is so little considered among us. With Monsieur Simon's main objection to the system, you know, I'm just going to start saying, well, he's French. Monsieur Simon's main objection to the system we are not concerned at all. For in this country it has no meaning. But when he denounces it as condemning the daughters of the middle classes to old maidhood when they are poor, he is simply accusing it of not being thoroughly and universally carried out. And we are only too conscious that among our own middle classes there is little or no attempt made to carry it out at all. He's even saying that the English people have this kind of guilt that they know is inside them that they're kind of refusing to talk about. And when the Frenchman comes and kind of points this out, it's like hard to deny. Even in the least prosperous class of the small bourgeoisie of France, the most strenuous efforts are made to put aside some provision for the daughters. Guys, this is written in 1890, by the way. So this isn't that long ago. And it is rarely that a girl has not some dowry, however small, to bring to her husband. See that? What does she bring to the table? Whereas in England, among the same class, it is rarely that the parents are able or even willing to give their daughters a marriage portion, or in the case of their remaining unmarried, to leave after death a sufficient sum for their maintenance. An obligation which is felt to be binding even by the poorest French also, guys, you know, sometimes in alimony, in court orders, they will call alimony maintenance, spousal maintenance. This is just another form of the word maintenance, so it gives you some idea of what maintenance is, you know, kind of supposed to be, basically. An obligation which is felt to be binding even by the poorest French peasant. So it's not just royalty, right? Even peasants are doing this. This is something I see over and over again in the literature. Is very often entirely disregarded by an English shopkeeper whose annual income may number as many pounds as the other's numbers francs. It is a great deal owing to this carelessness as to their daughter's future and neglect of their own duties on the part of the parents, that the questions of the marriage and the employment of women have been so much forced upon our notice lately. So this is why women wanting to work and why women's desire to enter the workforce more predominantly in England than these other countries happens, because they're not following the dowry system. So this is leaving the women in a crap situation also. So they're like, well, at least let us work, get rid of coverture, whatever the hell it is. You know, it's interesting because it's showing that there's these differences between England, France, and these, you know, other parts of Europe. It's not mentioned, but we just read about Germany. And so it's showing kind of the seeds maybe of why this early feminism also started. You know, like maybe some of this stuff is legitimate as far as why it, you know, sprang up. It is a great deal owing to this carelessness as to their daughter's future and neglect of their own duties on the part of the parents that the questions of the marriage and the employment of women have been so much forced upon our notice lately. English parents may now see the daughters for whom they have failed to make a proper provision, and we're right here in the U.S. right now. Tradcons have failed to make a proper provision for their daughter, and they expect you, some stranger who's not even related to this family, to go in there and save the day, Mr. Hero. Riding on your white horse, and you're going to come in there with all your money and your 2 jobs, and you're going to pay for everything. Just like you're supposed to, just like you biologically want to do, according to, you know, Matt Walsh and all these things. Okay. Descending into the arena and struggling to snatch away the work upon which the son subsists. See, so because the parents have failed to make proper provision for their daughters, the women have no choice but to descend into the arena and struggle to snatch away employment from what the sons are using to subsist. They may pretend to believe that this struggle for life among their children is a natural and inevitable result of the times that we live in. They may shut their ears with the fine affectation of shocked propriety when the poor girls cry out aloud for a husband and a home, and may deplore as much as they like the superfluity of women and their want of modesty. Now, I will say there is a tinge of gynocentrism in this. No, the women just want to be taken care of, and that's why they want to work. There probably also is some feminism and some quote-unquote, shout out to CGA, Jezebel spirit in this. But it's at least calling out the parents for not doing their part. You know what I mean? And may deplore as much as they like the superfluity. See, now I'm messing myself up. superfluity of women and their want of modesty. Basically, the women are out here partying. They're dressing immodestly. They're out at the taverns. They're trying to find that guy. You know, they're trying to find that rich guy. They're out here, possibly monetized activities going on. But they cannot blind themselves to the fact that they have done nothing towards providing their daughters with either a husband or a maintenance. How many tradcon men out here are doing this for their daughters today? And that their own life, and that it willfully fails to find support for the lives it has brought into being, and that their own life, and that it willfully fails to find support for the lives it has brought into being, must necessarily be a selfish and an imperfect one. It is true that they educate their children. This, in any case, they would be forced to do by the state, and it is often purely personal pride that makes them give them a better education than the state affords. But after such an education, though they may further concern themselves to find a profession or a trade for their sons, they trouble themselves no more about their daughters. In their case, they are content to become waiters on Providence, hoping for that guy in the white horse to come in. If chance should bring a husband, he will be no true lover, they say, if he will not take a girl without a dowry. Isn't this familiar, guys? You're not a real man unless you want to pay for everything, right? How dare you ask what she brings to the table? What is wrong with you? You shouldn't be respected. You should be shamed. See, this is kind of the origins of that, guys, and it's not unlike what we see today. If not, they will give their daughter lodging, food, and clothing until their own death, when she must shift for herself upon a miserable pittance, which does not pretend to make her independent. Let it be understood that we are not speaking of the upper classes of English society or the artisan and laboring classes. We refer only to the great bulk of the middle class, the clerks, the small professional people, the small traders, the small officials. That class, in fact, which is known in France as la petite bourgeoisie. People generally of small incomes and great pretensions. It is because their pretensions are great that the condition of their daughters is so unhappy, that their lives, unless they marry, are so weary and unprofitable, so stale and joyless, and that their existence, that begins and continues in discontent, ends not unfrequently in destitution. Small as their incomes are, these people live up to the very edge of it. This is some keeping up with the Joneses type stuff, and hardly make an effort to lay money by, their one preoccupation being to live with the appearance of greater wealth than they possess. This is keeping up with the Joneses, right? This is buying things on credit. We got to get a new BMW on the driveway, even though we can't afford it. The infinite gradations of the social scale that seem so ridiculous and afford such merriment to those at the top of the ladder are to these people stern realities, and they struggle tooth and nail to keep their position by making the same display of wealth as the class above them. They know no pleasures except strained and painful imitations of those of their wealthier neighbors. Such pleasures they cannot often afford, and it is fortunate, for they bring but doubtful enjoyment. Social life among them is almost dead, for they can conceive no entertainment of their friends that does not mean display and expense. They are good, they are virtuous and industrious, and yet their life is the most cheerless imaginable, and it is their own fault, for apart from their virtue and their industry, their life is but a sorry sham, wasted in making sorry pretenses and grasping at the unsubstantial shadow of social success. That kind of almost maps on to, people wanting to be career people. You can say career woman. Well, I got my good job here and all these kinds of things, whatever it is. But not just them, a lot of people, like almost everybody wanting to do this. Almost like keeping up with like social media type stuff, Add what dowry do they give their daughters, but an education, and what dowry do they give their daughters, but an education that makes them discontented with their lot and unfits them for any other. It seems kind of similar to some of the talking points of today, The money that could have been used to get them a good husband, they spend it all on college to get a career, and then they end up unhappy doing that, and then, not married, when they could have, taken a bid for marriage and using that money to do that. Okay. And what dowry do they give their daughters but an education that makes them discontented with their lot and unfits them for any other? It is a fact that cannot be denied that the middle class of England is the most backward of all in making provision for its womankind. In hardly any other country is there such indifference shown for the daughter's future. It would appear from the account of Herodotus that the maidens of Babylon, like those of London, were also dowerless, save for their virtue and personal charms. This is just a very nice way of saying a dowerless woman is basically a pay-for-play individual, right? But this is what bringing Babylon into it has to do, in my opinion. Save for their virtue, I mean virginity and personal charms. Oh crap, guys, I forgot to put myself back in here. There we go. But in their case, the marriage market was made to equalize the chances of all and provide everyone with a husband. So at least they had some provisions in those places. It was the custom to put up to auction the most beautiful and comely and to knock them down to the highest bidder. The money thus realized provided dowries for those less favored by nature. This is going to be these women, who were then disposed of to the more needy men who would consent to take them with the addition of the smallest sum. In this way, every girl found a husband and every man a wife whom he could afford. This, adds the historian with quiet irony, was perhaps the best of their customs. The customs of Babylon do not enjoy a very good reputation, but this particular one, detestable as it was, after all, simply the logical conclusion of a people who were too selfish to provide their daughters with dowries and yet wished to see them all married. You know, and it's crazy. People ask, like, oh, why are the women choosing to go into OnlyFans? Or why are the women choosing to engage in the monetized dating marketplace? And it's like, it's just, when you look at this stuff, I think it becomes pretty clear why we see that, because we don't have these practices in place to at least help give another option or another lane people can take that you can argue is more respectable. Okay. I'll read that last sentence again. The customs of Babylon do not enjoy a very good reputation, but this particular one, detestable as it was after all simply the logical conclusion of a people who were too selfish to provide their daughters with dowries and yet wished to see them all married. Man, we finally got Klaus in here. Klaus, dude, I was waiting for you. Klaus, listen, man, I know you're a busy guy. Yes, okay. That I wanted to add, I really want you to watch this one later because a lot of it focuses on Germany. And, you know, I just think you'd find it cool. So I just wanted to say that. But, man, I appreciate you coming in here. I know you're probably just waking up right now. Good morning. I hope the coffee's good today. I hope the eggs and, you know, the other stuff you got in your plate while you're watching me tastes amazing. We're talking real European German style butter right there to make those up. So that'd be real nice. Okay. Let me just go ahead and finish this off. We do not ourselves believe that the addition of the dowry would have any very great effect on the marriage question, that there would be very many more marriages and consequences. Or excuse me. We do not ourselves believe that the addition of the dowry would have any very great effect on the marriage question, that there would be very many more marriages in consequence, or if there were, that the result would be altogether a matter for congratulation. If a young man and woman wish to marry each other and the latter is content to wait, the former can generally find means of supporting a wife. Okay, this is these fruits of modernization and the economy being better than how it was in prior days. If he is worth anything and is really anxious to provide himself with that particular one. But at the same time, we consider that to talk of a girl's dowry as a bribe offered to young men that they may marry her for an unworthy motive of gain is not only nonsense. So this is the negative propaganda on the dowry. It's basically like, oh, well, if you want a dowry, you're just someone who's just has these ulterior motives, even though there's perfectly a normal reason for the dowry that makes sense. Is not only nonsense, but a hypocritical excuse put forward to disguise a selfish neglect on the part of her parents, and also that a family of any means who allow their daughter to go empty-handed to a poor man's house are wanting in the most elementary form of proper pride. So she's basically saying that families who do this have no honor, basically. They got no sense of pride in that family to give their daughter off with nothing. And they're basically saying, I don't know if it's a man or a woman speaking, actually, but the author is pretty much saying that this negative propaganda of saying, well, the guys are just looking for a bribe to get married because whatever it is nonsense. And it really is a disservice to what the dowry actually does and how it actually functions. And this accusation is just a means of parents trying to cover up their own selfishness and their neglect of their own children. Okay. It is not so much the want of a dowry that we deplore, but the want of that feeling in the middle class that should make them look upon the provision of a dowry as a necessity. The life of useless and pleasureless monotony that they condemn their daughters to lead, useless because they are too proud to allow them to work, pleasureless because they despise such simple pleasures as are within their reach and are too poor to provide them with others, and above all, the pretentious folly of an education, and leaves the daughters, if unmarried, without a competence and without the means of earning their own livelihood. An imperfect smattering of one or two languages and a still more imperfect knowledge of the piano. Damn, she's really hurting feelings right now, or he's hurting feelings. Like, yeah, you got her an education. So she can speak some French now, but she sucks at it. She can play the piano a little bit, but she's actually not really that good. Yeah, whatever, education. Are not sufficient by themselves to make a girl happy, nor are they likely to help her to better her condition. A better and more sensible education would provide her with more varied interests and teach her to appreciate the simplest and least expensive of pleasures. For people have to be taught how to enjoy themselves as well as how to work for their living. I mean, I can agree with that. It is a curious fact that, given two families of the same slender means, one of which has fallen from affluence and the other risen from greater poverty, the former will still manage to find opportunities for pleasure and amusement in spite of its scanty resources, while the latter is even less able to get enjoyment out of its improved circumstances than it was before. The results of a different education. Okay, so that was a fun article. Over 100 years old now, from the Sydney Morning Herald. Thursday, December 18th, 1890. Shout out to Peter Wright for finding that and sending it to us. I think we learned something. I mean, I feel like I learned something reading that. I mean, it gives us this window into what life was like that's so often hidden from. I mean, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist here. You know what I mean? But it's almost like there's been an effort to make us forget about this. You know what I'm saying? And they tried to scrape this from everywhere. Like, we gotta go digging deep. Peter Wright finding this is no easy task. Like, he's looking at, I mean, how do you find a newspaper article from 1890, let alone one about the dowry? You know what I mean? So, I mean, we have really had to go down some deep rabbit holes for this. But yes, that's pretty fun. Let me catch up with the chat here. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh man, I don't even know where Klaus Tynes OG. Yes, Klaus is the OG. Klaus says no breakfast for me, just coffee. Have to control my weight. I hear that, man. I've been pretty strict, but I had some fun in LA. I had a chocolate sundae, and man, that fudge sundae was really good. It was really, really freaking good. Shout out to Cesar Quintana, who I met out there, and we had a fantastic lunch. It was amazing. Eat only meat. Yeah. The carnivore diet there. Yo, $5 from Trevor. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate that. Now that modern women are starting to earn more than men, shouldn't it be the guys offering a bride price instead of women giving dowries? Well, again, it wouldn't be a bride price because that would be an amount paid to her family for her. It could be a bride price if we're assuming that the money she's making from her career, she's giving it to her father's hand or her parents' hand, and they hold the money. And if you marrying her, the money she makes, she's going to give it to your hand for your decision making. So her labors are going directly into your wallet, basically. You could potentially say, yeah, I'd have to give a bride wealth over to her family so that they can then find another daughter who works to marry one of their sons. Possible. But I think a dowry would make more sense. Yeah, it's like you're a normal guy. She's a doctor. Yeah, maybe you would come in with the dowry to make it make sense, because that would be hypergamy on the opposite end. I actually agree with you on that. So I actually like that you asked that question, because it means you're thinking about the economic principles behind this and how they actually operate. See what I mean? So, and again, that would be a hypergamous pairing, right? Now, from the article we read in Germany, what you're probably going to tend to see is people of equal class statuses marrying. And now if you're some red pill guy and you practice masculine frame and you know how to seduce these women because you read the whole book on intersexual dynamics, then I mean you better figure this out. You should be able to do it with enough smoothness and suaveness to sit here and get in here and sell. I mean, if that's what you want to do, but yeah, what you say has sound principles economically speaking with how marriage transactions work. Proud of you, Trevor. I actually am. I actually am, man. Shout out to you, bro. Shout out to iTrevor. That may seem like a good question, but it comes from such a wrong place. Devil's advocate question. No, I think it's a good question. Because it shows, too, you know, that we're thinking about this and we're understanding, you know, how all this stuff works and stuff. I wonder why they make it sound so exotic, as if it only existed in India. Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed too. I think that's kind of done because it's like you can use it to like say, oh, it's not something we do here. And my entire mission with, I mean, just to be honest, like I've focused, I mean, I have read about India and other places. I mean, it kind of took me a lot of places. But the reason I've spent so much time specifically looking for Western sources is because I have to make the case to the people here that this is something that's not incompatible with Western values, with the Western tradition, the Western, you know, ethical system. And it has a history going all the way back through that, not even just through Christian Europe, I mean, but all the way through ancient Rome and even to ancient Greece, and other places too. So it's not just something they do in this part of the world that doesn't make sense, and that's not what we do over here. You know, actually we do this, and it's been this the whole time, which isn't true. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if they do it on purpose. If they are, it could be just to kind of push it away so, you know, we don't have to confront it here. Now, thanks to Caesar Quintana, though, if somebody tries to say that, we can just tell them to look at the origin of Christmas stockings and why they go there. So, yeah. I mean, it definitely is very much rooted in I mean, you can say this entire civilization was built on the back of the dowry. The dowry got this place as far as it did because the dowry encourages monogamy. It's one of the only things that can encourage monogamy. And you see that in civilizations that became monogamous and became incredibly complex. And, you know, out of the 1,200 cultures or so that anthropologists and scholars were looking at in the 60s and 70s when they were doing this research, only a minority of the civilizations practiced dowry, 4% of those 1,200. But that 4% comprised 70% of the world's population because those cultures and societies became so successful in terms of producing food, creating class stratification, and with class, you know, with all this extra food and stuff, people can now specialize in other crafts and things. They can become really, you know, advanced in that way. And now I know advanced might be a politically correct issue, but you know what I mean? I mean, the proof is kind of, you know, it might, I don't mean to say they're less advanced or not. I think it is a product of the environment, but you can see the success of it based off the population growth and wealth and power, frankly. So yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's very fascinating and very important. And that's why I look at it from that sense, because I'm trying to ground it back in there. It's not even I have to try to do that. The history is there for me. I just need to show them that, basically. Murder of Crows says, Shah, you got to work on your foil hat game, bro. Yeah, that one's taking kind of a beating. It's more like a foil Phrygian cap at this point. Man, a foil hat is harder to make than you think. Like this, you rip off a square of foil and you're like, well, you know, this actually looks like a German, like I look like Otto von Bismarck wearing this thing. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can get a picture of Otto von Bismarck. I hope I'm thinking of the right guy. He was that legend, that Prussian guy, I think. Pre-World War I. Oh yeah, here's his hat. That's what I wanted to show you guys. Yeah, Otto von Bismarck. Man, I can't make, how do I get a bigger picture of him? Okay. That one doesn't show his main hat. Okay, see that? That one had a lot of text. Yeah, see, I mean, I think I'm giving off Otto von Bismarck. You guys see it? Like, you see the point? See that? See, that's Otto von Bismarck right there. Actually, I like this better now. Otto von Bismarck is an interesting historical figure. So yeah, let me take this off. Oh. Okay, here we go. Let me just go ahead and get. I'll call a stream here soon. Just shy of 3 hours. I think we did okay today, guys. I think we did okay. How'd you guys like the art going over the articles as a change? Be honest. You know what? I'll do it as a poll. How did you like the this stream with the articles? Well, it's kind of an academic journal, actually. It's not really an article. I guess you could say it's a scholarly article. Let's just go with that. Scholarly article. There we go. Oh, let me just take out how and just put did you like so we can just make it a yes or no. Nice. Okay. Caesar Quintana says, the waitress seemed impressed by you when I told her you were a famous YouTuber. Caesar Quintana was wingmanning me pretty hard. Caesar Quintana's the waitress we had, like, she was an attractive young lady. Caesar Quintana was putting some moves down. Like, his flirt game was on crazy. I was like, oh damn. Like, she was feeling him. She was feeling you, Caesar. Don't even try to deny it. Like, she was like, I could tell. Trevor says, so a dowry for the breadwinner, not just for men. Yeah, I mean, dowries exist because primarily men would women would be more housebound as they weren't needed in agriculture so much, and men would be the ones out there bringing income in from outside. So necessarily there's an imbalance economically between the two, and the dowry raises her up to match his contribution potential. But listen, if we're going to live in the era of feminism and women take half the jobs, then that's how that might work. It's funny because, like, we're immediately thinking kind of hypergamously, which is kind of funny, right? But now in the negotiation of that, it should even out into a more endogamous setup. But it's interesting. It's like a human tendency, I mean, it is. I think it is kind of interesting in that way because, like, yeah, people are always trying to get the best deal they can, and other people are not trying to, get screwed in the deal. So it leads to deals that are more better matching for people. Husband, price, dowry, whatever we call it, as long as we get our cows and trade routes at the end of the day. Yeah, I don't know about you, man, but I want Rivendell. That would be nice. And you got to remember too, like what you're saying, you're demonstrating you're understanding the economic principles behind it. The most important thing to me is, like, especially, like, kind of the first thing I'm focused on is tradcons, especially because tradcons are the ones that are selling this. The woman stays home and the man is the provider. So our answer to tradcon's like, okay, if that's how you guys want it, where is your daughter's dowry at? And if they say it's missing, we know something is seriously wrong with their proposition. And what they're giving us is essentially a bad deal. And no sane human should take a bad deal. So there's no protections there. And so that's kind of the most important thing. Because we okay, at least in my opinion, I don't know if it's the most important, but it's something that we keep getting inundated and shamed into. So this is basically the check against that, because they're trying to encourage you take a marriage with someone who's being completely unfettered hypergamous, and not have any shield against that, basically. Caesar Quintana, did Pearl say if she comes with the dowry? No. You know what's funny about Pearl, that I remember from her Twitter? And this was like a year or something ago. I remember her posting a video where she was walking on some land. And it was just, I can't remember, it was something, or her father or whatever bought it for her siblings, or each had a portion. And I don't think, she would, see it like that in her mind, but it's funny because that actually is kind of a dowry, basically. So Pearl actually has land as a dowry, as provided from her parent. You can actually say she technically does have a dowry. It's got, yeah. I specifically remember that video, and she was on there and she was saying like, guys, check this out, and it's like a bunch of undeveloped land, look like some good land, and it's just like, let's do something. And it's funny because that was kind of like an unconscious sort of dowry there. It's interesting. Trevor says, Dad will gift the marriage a property. Yeah. Murder of Crows. My God, someone other than me knows about Phrygians. Yeah. I mean, you know, you see those pictures and they have those caps, and then sometimes they'll even sell a beanie that looks like that. Klaus says it's the same hat the cute girl on whatever podcast is wearing. Oh yeah. I know you're talking about, like the girl that's always on the show and she has this hat on. Yeah, that's right. Good spot. Shah, you done well. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I'm glad I made it through this. I wanted to give you guys some kind of stream. I felt bad about not doing it yesterday, but it just wasn't, you know, there was no way it was going to happen. I thought about taking my stream stuff down to LA, but then it's just like, man, I don't like traveling with like thousands of dollars of equipment on me. And it adds up fast. It's like you have one camera, you know, you have your phone, you have your laptop, you have a microphone. I mean, frankly, like if you do the math on that, like now you're sitting here and you're carrying around these things. It's just like, you know, I try to travel as light as possible so I don't have to think about it too much, you know. But I do know that some people will bring in like a stream setup and they will do like a stream for their hotel room. But I think those are like passport bros. So they're already kind of traveling with their stuff, or maybe if they're doing it for work anyways, you know. It would be kind of cool someday. I think if I traveled for a while and I had to bring my laptop, then it'd be like a fun thing, you know. Caesar Quintana says, or maybe she'll gift control of her 2 million sub channel to her husband as dowry. Ain't no amount of dowry that'll ward off the speed dialed Mordor squad these days. Yeah, well, that is the tough part. Ahmed Multisep says, I would be okay with the dowry for the breadwinner in the future, but we need a few years of women paying it to men as reparations for all the free provisioning we have for them. Yeah, I hear that, man. That's funny. Klaus says, if the woman makes a lot more than me and I could be a stay-at-home man and wouldn't have to work, I wouldn't mind bringing my money into that situation. Sweet life. Yeah. And actually, Klaus, you characterize it the proper way, right? Because you're basically at home and doing whatever the house stuff is. You know what I mean? And it's going to be a hell of a lot. Like you saw from the paper. Oh, you weren't here, but in that paper about Germany, it said women preferred to marry like tradesmen or I think like finance or whatever type people instead of farmers, because if they married a farmer, they'd have to work harder. But they preferred to have more of a housebound life because it's less. There's no other, like, it's less work intensity basically. But yeah, you're right. And that's actually the right way to put it, because it's like, I mean, hey, a lot of guys by like 30, I think a lot of guys that are, you know, at least guys that are like college educated and have a job, like by 30 have, I would say, some savings. You know what I mean? So it's like, it wouldn't be impossible for a guy to save like, you know, let's say 50 to 100 grand by that time and say, all right, I'm coming in with this. You know what I mean? I'll put it down on the house. So, Joel. Hi, Joel. First time chatting. I just saw Matt Walsh's talk on Tucker Carlson and they called the MGTOW movement. Oh my God, man. Of course they did. And if you ask Matt Walsh how much of a dowry, see the thing, you know, it's funny. I can ask Matt Walsh how much of a dowry he has for his daughter. And now that he's a Daily Wire guy, he could be like, I was always saving a dowry, which would be hella funny if he said that. Cause it's like, well, how come you never mentioned it? But if you ask them that, you know, they haven't thought about it. They're not telling other people to save dowries for their daughters. Then nobody wants to come and you know, get married to these folks that offer nothing. And they're like, oh, MGTOW is no, MGTOW is just people that are sane, frankly. and they're looking at this horrible deal where everybody's overpaying and then still getting screwed. It's not like you overpay and then you at least get what you paid for, what you overpaid for. No, you overpay and then you get screwed and you don't even get what you overpaid for, you know? So if we ever get this dowry talk up to that level, they will have to eat those words about what they said about MGTOW when that time comes. So they can say that about MGTOW today, but once this comes, they will have to confront that. I expected more from the one who interviewed Andrew Tate. Tucker Carlson interviewing Andrew Tate, or I don't remember. That must have been a while ago. I don't think Matt Walsh interviewed Andrew Tate. Or are you saying that Tucker Carlson basically kind of gave him a softball interview? I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Tucker Carlson, I usually like watch. You know, I thought some of his interviews are interesting. But it sounds like from what you're kind of describing, it was a softball interview. That's messed up, man. They said this about MGTOW, basically. Where's my...
Oh, no, not the rainbow version.
How dare they?
Never mind. That says rainbow.
How dare they say that? But okay, fine. Smurf caps. You know what's funny, too? It's like the fact that they're mentioning that means that... I've always said that MGTOW are the guys that have had most of the real impact in the space, because that's when they start looking at men. When men start doing a marriage strike or avoiding marriage or not contributing as much because they don't feel the need to, since they're like, whatever, I'll just live a simple life. That's when it gets these guys' attention and they start trying to figure, like, they start thinking, oh, what's going on? You know, but before they're actually going to try to help or do anything positive, they're going to, of course, try to insult and shame you back on the plantation. But yeah, anyways. Smurf caps, Phrygian caps. Oh, Smurf caps, yeah. TikTok morons got all the time. $20. Oh, man, that's so generous, bro. That's real hard-earned money, Trevor. I appreciate you for that. I'll try not to spend it on bad things. Maybe I'll possibly save it for a marriage transaction. But thank you, sir. I'll have to apply that to a dowry fund or something someday. But again, yeah, I appreciate that, man. I love listening to audiobooks and podcasts, so this is right up my alley. Please do more of these. Just find good papers like these ones. It's also a great idea to add short form clips just to cut up the long form reading. Yeah, I'll consider that. You know, I think it would be an interesting format. You know, a lot of I think stuff you see on YouTube, you do see people read like articles sometimes, so that's not completely different, but it would be interesting to have like a kind of dedicated paper stream. But the thing is like these papers really worked out because the size of the papers weren't that crazy. But I have other stuff that's like, it's typically a lot longer. So we're talking like a 100-page book. Now I could go in there and find chapters that are particularly relevant. So then that would work for a stream. But I'm happy you enjoyed that, man. I thank you for that, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Actually, the poll results. Let me check it on the poll. The poll. 7 votes, 100% said yeah. Heck yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad, man. I wanted to do this stream because I don't know when Pearl is gonna release the footage there. But you know, when something like that happens, like, you know, it might do really well. And if it does, people might look for my channel. And it would be nice if when they came to the channel, like they can see this stream and it's like very relevant content to what was talked about there. But the interview did go well. I'll tell you, man, every time I do an interview, the next day, like my mind is like, man, I hope the stuff I said made sense and wasn't a bunch of non sequitur gibberish, because it's like, I feel like I was trying to put so much, like we're child support, dowry. There is a lot of stuff jam packed into this podcast. And I was thinking last night, and I was thinking if I said anything incorrect, and the one thing that I'm not sure about, or that I think can be quasi incorrect, as I said, the Roman Catholic Church owns the most property, which I think is technically true as like a private entity. But looking at, if you Google it, it's going to say technically King Charles III owns the most property. But that's a bunk stat because it's basically saying that all of the Commonwealth, like Canada and Australia, all belongs to King Charles III. But if he wanted to sell that land, he can't do it because Canada is sovereign from UK. So if you look at the Commonwealth, you can say it's bigger, but it's just like this kind of stupid way of saying, oh, well, one person owns that land. That's not true. And then number 2 in a list that you'll find on Google will be the Roman Catholic Church. So I said in the interview that the Roman Catholic Church owns the most land, which I actually believe they are the true number 1, because if they wanted to get up and sell their land tomorrow, they can. It's actually their land. It's not Canada's land or Australia's land. And so I don't know. Stuff like that will keep me up late at night. And I'll think, I hope that was presented in a way that made sense. Or I wish I would have added a clarifying statement. But when you're doing all this stuff on the cuff, it's like, the conversation's going a lot of different places. But I just tell myself if somebody, takes any umbrage with some of that stuff, it'll just give me an excuse to make more content later to either explain what I'm saying or, go over it again. Or, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'd love to know. So, yeah. But I'm very grateful I was able to go down and do that interview. It was a really cool experience. And I can't wait for it to get posted so you guys can watch it. And I hope you guys enjoy it. You know what I'm saying? No quicker way for them thighs to dry up. Just saying. What did I miss? I don't know if that's true, Murder of Crows. I honestly don't know if that's true, man. Somebody once gave me a study on it. And they said that the sex life only got worse if the guy made more money at first, and then the woman suddenly became, like 5 years in, starts making more money and becomes the main breadwinner. That's when it presents the most challenge. But that same paper also said that if both of them were making, like, if they came into a marriage or relationship and she was already making more and he was making less, that it didn't affect the sex life. So I'll have to dig that up again. It's an interesting thing, but it's another thing people toss around. I don't know exactly how true that is, They've telling us for decades. They've telling us all for decades that y'all get nothing. Yeah, how dare you ask them to bring anything to the table? MGTOW is the only way. Yeah, shout out to the MGTOW folks out here. I'll hang out for another couple minutes. Mr. Pitt says, women like Oprah that avoid marriage to protect their assets, smart and empowered. Yeah, men that do the same, gray, incel, women-hating virgins. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I think a couple weeks ago we read that article about women having to pay alimony, and it was like they were so angry about it. And like they even said, well, when a woman pays alimony, it's different than when a man. And it's like, no, it isn't. The law doesn't care about any of that. The law doesn't care. Like, when it comes time for the divorce, the law is not going to sit there and say, well, she's the woman. So when it actually comes to calculating alimony and child support, they're just going to look at a calculator or something. They're going to plug in your income, her income, and whoever's is more happens to be more. They're not going to say, oh, she makes more income, but she gave birth to the kids. Therefore, you still have to pay alimony because, women give birth. So a man's none of that stuff's in the law. Like, that's just all stuff people say that like doesn't even make sense. I saw a comment on It's Complicated, on a short from It's Complicated today. And some guy was talking about how when it comes to employers, if a woman gives birth, employers will only give like 12 weeks of maternity leave. Then they have to come back to work. Nobody gives a damn. But when it's time to talk to the husbands, it's like, well, the woman give birth and they should never have to work or do all this. And you need to do all that. It's just funny because when it comes to employers, God, I wish I could find that. I left a comment on it myself, but it was like, I don't know if it was a short posted today, I think, but it was interesting. Maybe I could find it. It shouldn't be too hard. I think it was YouTube also. I see his shorts in a lot of places, like, it's Twitter, IG, shorts. Was it this one?
If women are financially independent now, Why is marriage still framed as something men must provide for?
Societal standards. The societal standards say that men and being a man is taking care of a woman.
I just think sometimes things don't change, and it's nice to be in your feminine as a female and just feel like you're being taken care of.
Yeah, it's just nature. Like, you want a provider, and like, you want to be the carer, the caregiver. That's just how.
I mean, guys, like, of all the stuff we read today, like, you know, especially for the folks who are here for the whole stream, like, doesn't this give you a completely different perspective, like, when you just hear this stuff?
You're giving up your body and your life for a child as well, so I feel like having
You look through history, and it's like all these women used to come with dowries.
monetary security is not always the worst thing.
You can't work when you've had a baby, like when you're 9 months pregnant and had a baby. So yeah.
Okay, so there was a comment. Yeah, here it is. You can't work when you've had your baby. It says, notice how this only applies to the man, but not the employer. If your employer expects them to get back to work after 12 weeks, they will. It's just like funny. You know what I mean? Shout out to It's Complicated. Klaus says, who cares? I would cheat and grape them in the divorce court to get my money back. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. So what? They come at you with the dead bedroom. So go the no-fault divorce route. Okay. Oh, you ain't feeling it no more? All right. Peace out. You know, time to dip. Joel. Dowry or debt? Which way, modern man? Exactly. It's like that meme. Trevor, so use short form clips to get up the longer scholarly articles. Oh yeah, to cut up. Yeah. I agree with you. So, you know, I can find a couple articles like this and then just find clips. Like for this one, I tried to find those movie clips that were relevant to the article, but I think if there was more defined breaks, it would be a little bit easier. So it just keeps people more engaged. I like that idea, man. Murder of Crows. Friendo, you may attempt to divorce grape him, but with your judges and your Karen-centric culture, could you ever succeed? If she's making the money, he will succeed. Murder of Crows. Shah, you're all right, and thank you. I appreciate that. Klaus says, jokes aside, that has happened, and the women affected are really, really upset if they're the one that's paying. No, we read that article about women paying alimony a couple weeks ago. Not in my experience. Regarding some poor schlup ended up lower income than his bid. I'll tell you, man, there's a lot of guys that will take a bad deal on divorce because they're like still in love with her or something. And so like her attorney offers him like the crappiest of deals and he signs it thinking that like it'll help repair their relationship. This actually happened with that. Was his name Bret Hart or was that the wrestler? Ben Hart. You know that YouTuber guy, Ben Hart? Pearl actually interviewed him and he had that Matt Walsh and he had that daughter that was saying he was a bad dad. And then he comes out with how much child support he paid. This guy right here. I like his channel. I gotta watch some of his newer stuff. But yeah, he took a bad deal because he thought it would just make things better for the wife. You know what I'm saying? And man, I wish I could just find his top videos. Might be able to. 3 years ago, what is Bitcoin? Oh, man. How to get a wife like mine. Origins of the woe. How civilization collapses. It was one of these. But anyways, yeah, he had all the receipts. We actually reacted to it. I did react to it. It's just a while back, you know. Mary J. Blige got all upset because she had to fork over some dough to her ex-husband, who was not as super duper successful as her. He was still making in the 100K as a sound producer. Yeah, that's a good example. I think Halle Berry is another one. There are some women that are up there, and you know, it's just like it's crazy because when it happens to them, people are like, oh man, you know. But you know, if it happens to a guy, it's just Tuesday. You know what I mean? But anyways, yeah, guys, we're hitting 3 hours and 8 minutes. I do got to get up a little earlier tomorrow. I'm gonna have to do some extra work this week. But hey, I'll be in town Saturday, so you know, I'm thinking maybe we pick up next Saturday. So yeah, anyways, guys, appreciate y'all watching. I gotta respond to some text messages here. I appreciate everybody who donated, man. I hope you guys had fun. If you're new to the channel, appreciate you, Joel, and anybody who finds this after. So we will catch y'all on the next one. Klaus, I hope you do go back and watch the earlier stuff, and I hope you enjoy it. And that everybody has a fantastic week coming up, and everybody had a good Mother's Day and remembered to call their moms and say Happy Mother's Day. So yeah, anyways, see y'all next time, guys. Pearl discussion going to be posted soon. I'll make a community post when I spot it. And then, yeah, so we'll talk about that. See you guys later.